You think you're ready? All right. So, welcome to our meeting today. I think we'll just begin by saluting the flag. Please follow with me. All right, I'd like to ask our CAO if there's any modifications to the agenda.
Good morning, Chair Bass. There are no modifications to the agenda today.
All right, do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I'll move to approve the consent calendar.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Supervisor Wilson?
Yeah, I was going to ask if the board would entertain me in the concept of having an amending motion to the consent calendar to just add very simple language to the Constitution of the United States Celebration Proclamation, and that part of the proclamation that basically is focusing on the framers of the Constitution as opposed to all the amenders to the Constitution. And I think it's important that we recognize that because, as you know, the ideals of those folks who framed the Constitution framed it under a context of slavery, framed it under a context of no votes for women. And so there was just a lot of things missing in that framing. And I think the Constitution is an amazing document, but it's amazing because of its amendments and because its ability to be amended. And so I don't want to change this so much today because I think moving forward is more important than having a long discussion about this. But I do want to say that if this is brought back to us next year again, that it references those changes to the amendments, and I mean to the Constitution through amendments that gave everybody the right to vote and a lot of other rights that were brought into this. So I'm just asking that just for the moment that there's an amending motion that at the bottom of the Constitution Week where it says, and encourages all citizens to reaffirm the ideals of the framers of the Constitution had in 1787, which I'm not so sure we want to reaffirm all the ideals of the framers in 1787. Just add after that, and the subsequent amenders by celebrating the freedoms guaranteed to us through this. So I'm just asking to add 4 words so that we recognize the amendments that were made in this living document. And that's my amending motion if someone wants to help me out with that.
All right, anyone have a problem with that suggestion? Supervisor Bohn?
Are we going to pull this off ground?
Well, no, he just says, if everyone's okay with it, we can just do it.
I would have much rather had it pulled, and I think because I don't think that was what they had with what they had to deal with. We didn't deal with a lot of things, and a lot of things have changed. I don't have a problem with that. We've been doing the same one for 10 years that I know of, and if you want to change the Constitution or the way we recognize the Constitution, it's not a sword I'm going to die on. It's just I just don't want to dissect everything that comes through here historically, as it seems to be the norm lately. So it's fine.
Okay, and I don't want to dissect. I'm with you. So I'm taking a choice as to whether we want to go down that road. So thank you. All right. So thank you.
All right, so I think there was that brief comments that were made there, and we'll go on to public comment. We'll go to those in the audience first. Is there anyone here that wishes to comment on the consent calendar? Can I go back to you in just a second?
Yeah.
Let me do this. And can we go to those in public? I'm just going to do public comment, if that's okay, Supervisor Bohn, or?
Well, Teresa McGinnis is here in recognition of number 6, craniofacial, and I'd love to, I think Supervisor Madrone got the call on this, and I don't mean to step on you, hadn't said anything, but I think Teresa is here to receive that, and I appreciate her being here, so I would, since she is here.
Yeah, that is public comment. Come on up. We can, okay, tell you what, why don't you come up since you've been requested, and then we can, Supervisor Madrone can, this is going to be one of those days, isn't it? Sorry again. Welcome, thank you, and there is 3 minutes since we are under the public comment period.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you guys for bringing us to the table, and thank you very much, Madrone, and all the supervisors here. I would really appreciate that you guys do take this in consideration and in honor of our son, Chase McGinnis. And craniofacial is important to us because he is 7 years old. He survived a 9-hour surgery on his skull. His brain was too large for his skull, so they had to go in and repair it. So now he is, again, like I said, 7 years old, and he's running around playing sports like any other kid, and he survived this. And it's a big fight for me because it's hard for me every day, and it's the blessing I can ask for because he's living, and thank you. And he plays soccer. He is a beast. He's a basketball player. He is everything in between. And today I wear purple in honor of him and all those that have a craniofacial and craniosynostosis, and that's what he has.
All right.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Did you want to, we totally went off the rails already
It's
this
okay.
morning with Supervisor Bohn, but that's okay.
That's okay.
Then we'll go back to public comment. We'll let this is kind of presented this to you. I think Supervisor Madrone wanted to add something to you as well.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much for being here and giving us the honor to honor you and your son and all those others in the community that have been struggling with these kinds of issues. But I also want to thank Supervisor Bohn. I think his enthusiasm shows how much we all very much support this proclamation. So if I may, I would like to read it into the record and then come up and give this to you. So.
Thank you so much.
Craniofacial craniosynostosis Acceptance Month. Whereas the Children's Craniofacial Association began celebrating Craniofacial Acceptance Month in 2005 to bring awareness to the thousands of children in the United States each year who are either born with or develop a craniofacial difference, which is a physical anomaly of the skull and/or face, and whereas there are various types of craniofacial anomalies with different causes and medical implications, while the most well-known syndrome is cleft lip, children are born with other facial differences, including Apert syndrome, Treacher-Collins syndrome, facial palsy, and craniosynostosis, which is seen in about 1 in every 2,500 babies in the United States. I had no idea it was that widespread. You're educating us. Thank you. Whereas individuals with craniofacial differences and their families often struggle to understand what they are facing and how to move forward in their early stages of life, and may experience emotional and financial strain due to the demands of ongoing and expensive medical treatment. And whereas due to the complexity of craniofacial anomalies, affected individuals will often endure multiple surgeries before they reach adulthood. And whereas there is a lack of education and information shared with the general public about individuals with facial differences, and whereas organizations such as Children's Craniofacial Association, a 501c3 nonprofit organization, serve individuals affected by craniofacial differences and the professionals who care for them in order to empower and give hope to them and their families, while working towards the vision of a world where all people are accepted for who they are, not how they look. And whereas Children's Craniofacial Association has designated September 2022 as the 18th year of Craniofacial Acceptance Month. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Humboldt County Board of Supervisors hereby proclaims September 2022 as Craniofacial Acceptance Month in Humboldt County, California. Signed by Chair Virginia Bass. So, thank you.
Right, so thank you, and Supervisor Madrone will bring that out to you.
Thank you very much.
And when he comes back up here, then we'll continue.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, so now we'll try this again. Is there anyone else in the public who'd like to comment on this item who's with us today, or any items on the consent calendar? Seeing none, we'll go to those on the phone. And since most of us are having a hard time getting our Zoom up, Yeah, okay, it still says September 12th. I'm living in the past, and you forgot your computer. So Nikki, can you tell me, do we have any hands up?
No, we don't, Madam Chair.
We don't have any hands up. All right. Well, in that case, we're back to the board. Any other comments board members would like? Supervisor Bushnell?
Thank you. I would just like to recognize the proclamation for Linda Candiotti, who has worked as a PA in the Southern Humboldt community for 34 years and has worked at the Southern Humboldt Clinic for 24 years. She's touched many, many lives in the community, her and her husband and her family. And she's not retiring. She just is being congratulated for so many years of service. And so I really want to recognize her. I also want to just point out that on November 5th, the Planning and Building Department will be closed in the afternoon, and there will be a press release to reflect that. I would hate for anybody to drive from the Southern Humboldt area or Willow Creek area and find that building closed in the afternoon. So Director Ford is going to advertise that and do a press release with the CAO's office.
Just a point of clarification,
Fourth.
November 4th. Yeah.
November 4th. I knew that as soon as I said that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other supervisors? Supervisor Wilson?
Just for a point of process and clarification, if we could have a vote on the amending motion before that would be great. And we can-
Okay, thank you. I don't have that often. So.
Ready?
Okay, apparently so.
If you need me to repeat it, I will.
You just want to add the amended, add the amenders to the end of it, or?
It's basically on the last paragraph. It says, and if you look at it, it says, and encourages all citizens to reaffirm the ideals of the framers of the Constitution had in 1787, and then this is where you add 4 words, and the subsequent amenders by, and then moving on, by celebrating yada, yada, yada. Thank you. That's all. No, yada, yada is not, but if you'd like me to finish the sentence, I can. Through this guardian of our liberties and to remember the lost rights, many may.
Today?
Changing it today.
I thought you said next.
No, I said next year we're going to have a bit, we may have to have more of a conversation about this because there's more language in here that's probably. I'm just going to say, in our DEI work, we're just going to have to really be aware of the language we use and those sorts of things. And so for the future, in today,
Yes.
thank you.
Okay, so for clarification, since you were the maker of this motion, we're not doing a separate motion on this one particular item. We're basically, I'm just going to include the amended motion for D3.
I believe the process is that we have to vote on the amended motion first.
And then vote.
And then
for
the
it.
main motion,
It might have
yes.
been easier to pull this, I'm thinking.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, so then Supervisor Madrone, would you still be the seconder of this amended
Yes, I am
motion?
happy to be.
Okay, so we're ready for, hold on just a second.
I love how our newfangled stuff doesn't let us do what we're supposed to do.
Beta testing every day.
Okay, we ready for roll call? Supervisor Bohn,
Yeah.
Supervisor Bushnell,
Yes.
Supervisor Madrone,
Yes.
Supervisor Wilson,
Yes.
and Supervisor Bass.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries 5-0. Now for the rest of the consent calendar.
Okay.
Let me put the motion, sorry. Okay. Supervisor Bushnell,
Yes.
Supervisor Bohn,
Yep.
Supervisor Bass,
Yes.
Supervisor Madrone,
Yes.
and Supervisor Wilson.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 5-0.
All right. So now we're going on to the public comments on items not on the agenda. I did want to remind folks that we did mention this the last 2 meetings prior to our break, so that people would at least have the understanding. I know Supervisor Madrone, as I mentioned, this is what he'd like to try next year, so we thought we'd start it now to kind of get people in the habit and see how it goes. So for anyone who was surprised, we had kept it mentioned multiple times, but change is always a little bit discombobulating, so I apologize if somebody was not aware of this morning. So first we'll go, is there anyone in the audience who cares to comment on items that are not on our agenda? All right, seeing none, we'll go to those on the phone. If there's any, Nikki?
Madam Chair, I have no callers on the phone.
No callers on the phone. Are we sure the phone's working?
Well, I have a caller, I have no hands up.
Okay, good. All right.
Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. That makes it, yes, thank you. All right, well then, we will go back to the board and move on to our next item. I know we have a 9:30 time set, so we're going to try to squeeze in. Hold on just a moment. Okay, so you're going to do something. All right, so we'll go on to the first item coming to us from Supervisor Madrone, I believe. Was that regarding the proposal to rename the headland named Patrick's Point in Sumig State Park to Sumig Point? Anyway, Supervisor Madrone, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Chair Bass. And just for everybody's interest, the pronunciation, according to the Yurok people, is Sume.
Sume.
The G is silent. But really, this is following up on a lot of efforts happening more recently to try to honor original native names for places and bring us into the current 2022, the current century. So this is a real simple item. It is to rename the point in the park to Sume Point, and that's all it really is. So I don't think there's a whole lot more to need to be said, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions.
Okay.
They really, they're asking for our input. This is a process that happens at the federal level, and then there's also, state parks is involved and other things like that. So any questions, happy to answer.
Okay, thank you very much. Supervisor Wilson?
I have a quick clarifying question. This is just, you're asking us to basically have a policy so that in the future, if someone asks us for our opinion on a name change.
Well, I believe this is specific to this particular name change, not a policy.
Well, I mean, a policy specific to this name change for,
We're
have we
just
been
offering,
asked?
we've been asked what our opinion is and whether or not we support this.
Okay.
So we're just offering our
Like
support.
a letter of support?
It's just a vote of support for the change.
Okay, so just a simple
It's that
policy
simple.
shift.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, and I saw Supervisor Bushnell or Supervisor Bohn. I'm not sure which one of you is first. Supervisor Bohn?
I'm going to make a motion that we support this, but under the condition, if we could have more information, so we're not, I agree that I imagine you probably got lots and lots and lots of phone calls. I've got nothing on this. There's no correspondence with this. And, we don't have any letters from the tribes or the communities it affects. And when I read the state park, when they changed it, they included the headlands. So it says, including the headlands. We renamed the park and the headlands. So I wasn't sure what we were changing, and I would have loved to have more clarification, because as this is written, it's brought to us very, very vague. And if you didn't explain to us what's going on, it sounds like something that you just want to happen, and there's no correlation with this.
Through the chair.
I'm going to make a motion that we accept this. We write a letter of support. I don't need to have a back and forth. I'm just saying in the future, I know if I did this, I'd be getting the same lecture. So, thank you. And it's not a lecture, it's just a suggestion to make our life a little bit easier.
Absolutely, and I don't see it as a lecture. I appreciate your input, Supervisor Bohn. In the discussion element, I'll second it.
Okay, and Supervisor Bushnell's next, but Supervisor, since this was going back and
Do you want to
forth.
go first, Michelle? Supervisor Bushnell.
Michelle's fine. Thank you. So I additionally, there wasn't a lot of clarifications or any letters or documentation. So I'm assuming you talked or you sponsored it because someone asked you to, or?
Yes.
So if you could clarify that for me, that's all I would ask.
Absolutely. So the way these things work is that, yes, when the state park name was changed, that was an action that was available to the state via the State Parks Commission, and that happened, as we know, last year. It did mention the headland, but that doesn't change that name because that's a a point name or a geographic name, and that has to happen at the federal level in order for that final change to happen. So I apologize if that wasn't explained, but that's the basic part to that process. Some people have asked me, so what about Patrick's Point Drive? Well, the bottom line is that these things are starting to happen all over, but in no way do I intend to bring forward a change of that county road without the support of the people that live on that road. And I recognized early on that one of the ways that the support for that might happen easier is if we can come up with the money to help, especially businesses, but even private residents, pay for the cost of changing websites, stationery, addresses, et cetera. And so I put out some feelers, and I've actually been able to get the money to help minimize that impact to the local residents. So it is my intention to go door to door and ask the residents' opinions of that. But that's not what we're here for today. We're here simply to let the federal government, that I think it's the USGS, that has responsibility for these kinds of geographic name changes. So I hope that helps answer the questions.
And I did want to say I received some communication earlier this, a couple months ago as well about this, but
Yep.
I do think the process wasn't clearly defined. So
That's great. That's why we have discussion.
I understand that. Supervisor Wilson?
Okay, so from my perspective, we have a policy. We're supportive of changing the name of Patrick's Point Bluff, or whatever it's called. Patrick's Point to Sumag Point. Thanks.
Yes. Supervisor Bushnell, then Bohn.
So I don't understand, Supervisor Wilson, what you're saying about the policy.
Basically, if anyone asks us about this, we have an answer, and that is, in essence, a policy.
So similar, we're sending a letter of support to doing this is another way to say it-ish.
We could send as many letters
Yeah.
of support are required. That's how, that's
Yeah.
why, so that we don't have to come back and talk about
Right.
it again. That's
Like
why
it's
we
like-
have a policy.
right.
Thanks.
Does that clarify for Supervisor Bushnell a bit? Like the ledge platform, except different. Supervisor Bohn?
And this is specific to the headlands? Yes. Okay. So, okay.
All right, so, do we have a motion on that yet? Sorry, I thought so. Without the machine up here and working, it's a little bit discombobulating. So I will go to those in the audience. Is there anyone here who'd like to comment on this specific item? Seeing no one, we'll go to those on the phone. And do we have any hands up? Nikki?
Yes, Madam Chair, number ending in 7607 has their hand up.
7607. All right, press star 6 to unmute, and you have 3 minutes. Reminder, it is a strict 3 minutes. Also, before they begin, I did want to say, if you're watching this at home, please remember that turn your volume off, because if you're watching the video feed and then you call in, there's like a 30-second time delay. And so that can result in missing the opportunity to speak if you are listening to us on the video instead of on the phone. So just a reminder to folks. All right, so 7607 is your opportunity to speak.
Hi, this is Diane Edwards. Can you hear me?
Yes, welcome.
Hi. I fully support the name change, but there's a cost associated with this. I was walking this last weekend at King Salmon Beach, and there's a interpretive placard out there showing a map of the coastline, showing where the marine protection areas are. And on the map, it says Patrick's Point. There's a lot of those types of mapping all over, plus Google Maps. So there's a cost associated with the name change. It would be good if, like, for 10 years afterwards, it could be named formally Sumag, formerly known as Patrick's Point, so that our tourists can find where they're wanting to go to. I think Patrick's Point State Park is famous nationwide and attracts a lot of tourism. Tourists who want to come visit may not be able to find where they want to get to. So there is some cost associated with publicizing this on all of the maps and interpretive signing that is all about the county. That's all. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Those are good points. I see no other hands up. Nikki's?
That's
All right.
correct.
Okay, so then we'll go back to the board. I did want to ask Supervisor Madrone, you mentioned some financial, and we were talking about the people that live on the roads, and think she brought up a point about planning for other things, and I'm not sure how that gets approached, but there's time for that if it if it actually happens, I guess.
No, it's a great question and point that the speaker brings up, which I spoke to a portion of that in terms of the county road. When the hearing happened before State Parks, there were some commissioners on the State Parks Commission that were concerned about the precedent that this might set. And the chair of the State Parks and Recreation Commission said, yeah, it does set a precedent. And there might be a lot of different names that end up changing. There was also a recognition that there would be county road signage, Caltrans signage, and as the speaker mentioned, other interpretive signage. So there are costs to these things, but there's also cost to naming things over what this gentleman was supposedly accused of doing. So what we're trying to do is remedy that and bring things forward, and it will take time to get all of these things taken care of and brought into order. I agree, that the old park name was absolutely well known, but we adapt. We're really good at that as human beings, and we will move forward and take care of all these pieces as we do. So, thank you.
All right, thank you. I believe we're ready for a roll call vote.
Okay, Supervisor Madrone.
Yes.
Supervisor Bushnell.
Yes.
Supervisor Bass.
Yes.
Supervisor Wilson.
Yes.
And Supervisor Bohn. Thank you. Motion passes 5-0.
All right, so now we're going to move on to our 9:30 time set. This is probably as close to a time set we've actually made this year. And we even started late. So at this point, I'd like to turn this over to our CAO Hayes to introduce our visitors.
Thank you, Chair Bass. We have with us today Karen Ling and Paul Yoder, who will give a presentation on this year's legislative activities. Also, supporting behind them is Sean Quincy, who helps to drive this effort through the county processes. So thank you, Sean, for that. And I'll pass it off to our fondly known as Thunder and Lightning.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair and members. Thank you for having us here. It's really nice to be here in person. Haven't been to see you live since the fall.
Karen, I'm sorry, Supervisor Bohn wanted to make sure that you can be heard.
Sorry. I think so. Sorry. I
Okay,
can be so
thank you.
loud sometimes. I'm never sure. So thank you again for having us. It's great to be here in person. Haven't been able to do this since 2019. So it was just really nice to see you all. And of course, our last time with you, Supervisor Bass, and we've kind of grown up together here. So really appreciate all the time we've spent with you. I wanted to go over, I'll sort of do the look back and Paul will do the look forward. Certainly anybody who tries to sit in this chair and tell you that they knew how things were going to go down for the last 2 years has the crystal ball that I'd love to get a hold of. It's been pretty wild. Very specifically for Humboldt in 2022, the things that we worked on after hearing from you last year, the most focused priority we had was trying to help your cannabis growers deal with the cultivation tax. Your delegation members had been working on that for years. They were finally successful. Senator McGuire carried the bill, but because it was fiscal, it was always going to flip to a budget item. The cannabis trailer bill that was approved in June did eliminate the cultivation tax. There are still going to be issues down the pipeline that have to be worked out to try to support the regulated industry, statewide, but certainly the North Coast's acute problems were heard loud and clear by the administration and your delegation, and they did everything they could to try to get that relief. I know that it's not working its way through the whole system yet. Heard that loud and clear yesterday during our meetings as well. That was going into 22, one of our highest priorities that we were working on for you. Certainly tried to be as helpful as we could with the state controller's office through the various things that occurred here in the last year. Her staff, Betty's staff, was phenomenal, very responsive to try to support your staff working through those issues. Certainly trying to help answer questions as we were responding to the various changes in the pandemic rules and elevating county concerns as best as we could. There was just a lot happening moment to moment almost. And actually my last meeting this morning before we walked in here is with your Human Resources Department and trying to help public agencies navigate the ever-changing rules with respect to COVID and the requirements as employers. You're a huge employer in the area. Obviously, all public agencies are. We spend a lot of time trying to help navigate through that. And then, of course, trying to support the economic development of your county. Very exciting with the development of the Cal Poly being named last year. And then the federal and state administrations focusing on wind energy, so trying to elevate those issues in Sacramento to help support the county's work there. And then most recently learning about Nordic fish and trying to help your planning department work through that process, which is a very exciting potential economic development opportunity for the county. Certainly this morning, it looks like we're very quickly going to be turning to power distribution, which, I think there's probably lots of meetings to come on that. Looking back on the budget, which is the largest piece of policy that is inevitably passed by the state legislature each year, the size of the state budget for 22-23 was $308 billion. It's the largest state budget in history. A lot of it was one-time funding above and beyond what we normally spend to hopefully alleviate what is probably coming, which is a correction in state revenues. There will be there's $17 billion that was part of a broad-based relief package. Checks should start to arrive relatively soon here to individuals. It was a phased relief package. Certainly when the budget was being passed, we were at the height, I think, of the gas prices, and so that was really being strenuously communicated to the administration that individual households were struggling, and so there was a tiered relief package based on your income, the number of cars you owned, the number of dependents that you have. So your constituents should be receiving relief checks based sort of on how big their household is and what their level of income was, and those checks are going to start to roll.
Excuse me, Supervisor Bohn, may I have a question?
Yes, sir.
Just so you know, historically, we're still at the height of our gas prices.
Okay.
Well, I keep hearing about all this relief everybody's getting, and we have no gas relief.
Sure doesn't, at least it doesn't feel like it.
Okay, thank you. Oh my goodness. Okay, so trying to cut to the highlights because there was just so much. There was just so much in the budget. I'll try to cover some of the highlights and the policies that were approved by the legislature. But of course, please ask me about things I skipped over. There was just so much on so much. It's hard to really, without droning on and putting you all to sleep, cover everything that happened. I think probably working backwards from the very end of session, right as the legislature returned for the final 4-week slog, the governor made known to the legislature he had a series of proposals he wanted to see introduced and finalized in the last 4 weeks. They were really big pieces of policy. The biggest piece was keeping Diablo Canyon online. You're one of the very few counties that has ever been home to a nuclear power plant. And those are big policy decisions to be made when you keep one open and operating. Because of grid concerns that we all just lived 2 weeks ago, and now you are going to be living apparently for quite some time. We didn't have enough power to keep the lights on, and I think the administration saw that we weren't going to be able to bring on new generation fast enough to allow for Diablo Canyon to go offline as scheduled. So the biggest and the last piece of legislation that was approved before they shut down for the 2 years was a bill to extend the life of the Diablo Canyon power plant in San Luis Obispo. That's a big decision, and there was legislation approved only a few years ago to wind it down, and now they're going to wind it back up for a little bit longer. That was pretty much the biggest, most controversial item that happened. There was a ton of funding attached to some of the proposals that were the governor's climate package, but he had a few pieces of legislation, the setbacks for new wells, not existing wells, but new extraction wells were going to need to be over 3,000 feet away from homes, schools, hospitals, and other sensitive communities. That bill was approved. A bill to increase the acceleration of our move to zero carbon was approved. There was one bill that didn't get approved, and that was the very hard increase in carbon reduction beyond our existing statutory goals. It just seemed like that was the one thing that sort of the moderates got together and was able to stop it. That was of the 6-bill package that the administration brought forward. Most of the rest of those things were passed. The climate package was signed on Thursday or Friday of last week, and a big sweeping thing. And the governor is actually in New York this morning making comments at the climate summit in New York. Tons and tons of money to various programs, DWR, California Energy Commission, to do standby generation, long-term battery storage, things that are really intended to help communities develop their resiliency as climate change accelerates. Lots of funding for water and drinking water in the drought. Closer to home for you, the wildfire issues continue to plague the state. Thankfully, we got some rain in Sacramento area yesterday to help kind of put out the mosquito fire, which has been burning for a couple of weeks now. I think that you'll see some real activity at the Board of Forestry. Not everything that is happening to you or is going to happen to you is happening in the legislature. There's a ton of regulatory action that's important to track, including the Board of Forestry. I want to commend RCRC in particular for their work on those regulations related to where you build in the wildland-urban interface, because you're still trying to comply with RENA, which Supervisor Wilson had brought up yesterday, the struggles of all of the restrictions that are being placed on you by various regulations and laws, but you're still supposed to comply with RENA, and how is that fitting into all of the other overall arching strategies that the legislature and regulatory bodies push forward? I think it's going to be an ongoing conversation that we have in Sacramento on that. Trying to wrap up here, there's just, again, a ton, and please ask me if I've skipped over anything that you were really focused on, and I will hand it over to Paul.
Thanks, Karen.
Sure.
Am I on? Good morning. I don't have to.
I think that's right.
There we go. Thank you, Karen. Good morning, board members. Karen said I'm going to look forward. I am, but I'm going to do a little bit of a look back. We actually, our firm was successful in killing, because that's the word we use, some bad bills in the legislature. Would have been harmful to all counties, including Humboldt. Very happy about our continued ability to do that. We were also very influential in getting one bill in particular that would have been very harmful to counties, AB 1951, vetoed. That bill would have endangered realignment monies. And at a time when care court is now the law in California, and when the administration has said that realignment, along with Proposition 63, some other funding sources are what the governor and his staff think are the ways they think counties ought to figure out how to fund care court. But another thing we did, speaking of care court, that we're very proud of is a lot of folks were obviously trying to get the amount of money increased. But about 2 weeks before everything was finalized, we learned that the administration was, when they proposed some money finally for counties, $31 million, they were also going to put it in 3 separate silos. And some of the larger counties in California had asked for funding for some things specifically, and we said, hey, why don't you just add flexibility, don't silo this money, say the counties can spend it in a variety of ways, including but not limited to, and that's what happened. And so we're very happy we were able to do that for all counties in Humboldt as well. So looking forward, now we can talk about care court in the future. We just talked about it in the past. We can talk about it in the future. You're not a cohort 1 county. In the end, only counties that were willing to go into cohort 1 are in cohort 1. In the end, the administration gave up on their insistence that counties with half the state's population be in cohort 1. When all was said and done, it's counties with probably about a quarter of the state's population, a mix of large suburban and rural. They have to roll that out by October 1st of next year. Current law says you will have to roll it out by January 1 of 2025, well, the end of 2024. But you will have the ability to apply for an extension. What we've been telling folks, though, is we're not sure any county should really want that, because I think you would have to have some really horrible local conditions. Something extant like a large forest fire that would compel the administration to give you an extension. And so I think the cohort two counties for now should plan on implementation by the end of 2024. So that's looking backwards. Looking forwards, more so, the first thing I want to make sure I don't forget to mention is we are going to have a pretty enormous turnover in the legislature going into the next legislative session. A quarter of the legislature, there may be some surprises, the number could go a little higher, but a quarter of the legislature will be new. Okay? We may also, I think the board's aware, the public's aware, there was an attempt to route the current speaker, Anthony Rendon, by Assemblymember Rivas over on the Central Coast. That effort this summer did not succeed. We'll see what happens going forward, but we may see at least one of the two leaders change a little sooner than later, going into 23-24, the two-year session. Things are a little bit more stable, seemingly, over on the Senate side. But a quarter of the legislature is going to be new. In 2024, half the legislature will be new. Yeah, half. And so if you think the last couple of years have been interesting, to use the generic, the easy word, right? Interesting. Couple of years. The next couple ahead may actually be even more interesting, just because of the political turnover in the legislature. For the ballot propositions, there's a couple worth mentioning. Reproductive rights is on the ballot. Proposition 1 is a proposal to put that in the state's constitution. Propositions 26 and 27 for gaming on sports. If you haven't seen those commercials, you don't watch television. Period. You just don't watch television. But recent polling shows Proposition 1 that the voters are inclined to support it. Likewise, recent polling indicates that the voters want to support Proposition 27, despite all the money spent on all the negative ads. In the last poll, it was actually shown passing. That is the one. 27 is the one that could potentially bring in a couple $100 million a year, according to the proponents, for homelessness and substance abuse and mental health treatment for the homeless. There are differing opinions as to how much money would really come in as a result of Prop 27, but that is the measure that would. Proposition 26 also has a provision, but the estimate of revenue that would come in from 26 is a lot lower than 27. Yeah.
I just have a question. We've been in discussions about this, and Prop 27, while it sounds good, it's like it's going to make a lot of homeless too, potentially, because people are going to be spending their money. Anyway, it's very interesting conversations about it, so I was surprised that you said it's, so
the main two things I want to make sure the public is aware of. If they both pass, we get asked that a lot, what happens? The measure with the highest number of votes, even if it's one more vote, that is the one that sort of carries the day. It's not like you have to work out conflicting provisions or anything like that. Highest votes wins. Yeah. Oh, Supervisor.
And when you bring up Prop 27, because this is the most confusing thing that nobody wants to touch, because I've talked to some tribal people recently to ask how they felt about it, and it's a confusing measure. It by no means whatsoever. But I know 27 has definitive numbers, but does it have, it's driven completely on revenue and the percentages, but what would the revenues for a county like ours depend on how much was wagered, or is it going to be broken down by populace? I've read it on, and I know someone working on the campaign, but it's just, it's not very clear. Neither one is very clear. They both say, I guess it's just like any ballot statement. We're going to solve all your problems. Watch us. And we still have problems, and we've had a lot of ballot measures passed. So, but is there a breakdown? Definitive, or is it just trust me?
The minute I say what I think, Karen is going to find some facts to refute me, actual facts. But I think it is more or less envisioned as a population-based formula. The other thing that we wanted to let folks know is that if both measures fail, I guarantee you, as we sit here today, there will be at least one, if not several measures on the 2024 ballot. And so that's the way California works. And this isn't the last time the carousel is going to go around on sports wagering in California. I'll bet you this isn't the last time. Sorry, couldn't resist. I got one laugh. On two. Proposition 31, I think, is also worth mentioning, just because of a lot of counties supported the bill to ban menthol cigarettes and to restrict vaping in California. The industries that make and market those products, they have a referendum on the ballot. And again, there were just a lot of counties that care about smoking, care about vaping. And so I think that's worth highlighting as well. And speaking of referendums, and going back to what Karen said about the climate package, no sooner had the legislature passed one of the bills in the package that would create a buffer zone between domiciles and drilling wells in California. A 32-foot setback is the word they use. No sooner had the governor signed that bill than folks went to the Secretary of State and filed a referendum on that bill. They now have, the clock starts, they now have until, I forget which day, but they have until December. It's a short window. You really got to hustle to qualify a referendum, but they have started that clock. They have a lot of money. They are going to gather signatures and try to put a referendum on the 2024 ballot to ask the voters what they think about setbacks for oil wells in California. So it's just, I mention that just because it highlights the dynamic process, the dynamic political process that we have. And maybe that word sounds more positive than I intended to, but I mean it as objectively, as a descriptor. We just have a very dynamic political process in this state. You think something is said and done, and folks have the option in the Constitution to go, nope, we're going to go talk to the voters directly. And so we'll see what happens there. The last couple referendums that were initiated by groups that did have a lot of money did manage to make it on the ballot. Doesn't mean they passed, but they did manage to make it on the ballot. Karen talked about the revenues going down, and then we'll take questions. I'm just going to add to that a little bit. Got to manage the expectations. This year, obviously, was a huge budget year. Speaking of, a dynamic system happens in California on a regular basis. We go from boom to bust. I don't know if we're going to bust, but revenues are under projections, as Karen said. And what we do know is the State Department of Finance has told state departments and agencies, don't submit budget change requests for more money. You can submit technical requests, like you need another half a PY that you didn't get last year, but don't try to start a new program and say we need 30 new people in this, Department of Toxic Substances Control or some such thing. So that's what we know. The state is managing its own expectations, and so we want to make sure the public's clear. Absolutely got to thank your small but mighty state legislative delegation, Senator McGuire, Assemblymember Wood. You really are blessed with their effectiveness, given that you only have two legislators. And so with that, we're happy to take questions.
Before we jump to that.
We are not happy to take questions.
No, I got the answer on Proposition 27. Supervisor Bohn, it will flow similar to how the HHAP money flowed. So that is, it's reliant on your PIT count, which is the point in time homeless count, which is how the governor has allocated funding for counties and cities to deal with their homeless population. That is the same mechanism that would be used if Proposition 27 passed. So I believe that in a weird way would be good for you, but I would defer to Ms. Beck to confirm the numbers relative to other areas of the state.
And whichever way it flows, and it's me personally, when administrative fees eat it up, and I'd much rather have the monies hit the rubber meet the road and actually help homeless rather than the people that have, it shouldn't be hard to administer homeless funds because there's a lot of the situation that we administer. So, thank you.
It'd be Supervisor Wilson, then Madrone. Did you have your?
Well, at least as of a couple of weeks ago, I believe Bear River Band Rancheria, Big Lagoon Rancheria, Blue Lake Rancheria, and Hoopa Valley Tribe opposed 27. So I don't know where the
and Trinidad actually, while not an official opposed position, they have a lot on their website that's the opposed language. But because I've been trying to figure that out too.
I just wanted for clarification. And then this is actually asked for staff. We can take positions as a board on propositions or not. Can we vote to do that?
Yes, you can. And then if there are specifics contained in the ledge platform that
Right.
allows my office to expedite those support letters and
Awesome.
refer directly to the legislative platform.
Okay, anticipate Prop 1 coming back. Thanks.
Supervisor Madrone?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had one clarifying question for the CAO and then a couple of pieces of input for you guys. In regards to how we develop our legislative platform, we have our consultants meet with each individual board member, get their input on ideas, thoughts, concerns that we have. Those things get forwarded into a draft ledge platform that then comes back to our board for final approval, modification, et cetera, where we ultimately all together work to approve our platform. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Excellent. All right. I'm glad I've got a good understanding of that. My apologies for missing our meeting yesterday. I've had some family emergencies lately that I'm
we
tending
understand.
to, and so it was in no way out of disrespect. I really wanted to meet with you, so I guess my best chance is just to give you very quickly some of the input I would have given you yesterday without taking up too much time of the board. And then, of course, it'll come back to us as draft. Yeah, and we can reschedule for a
Yes,
more
we can.
in-depth conversation. But just very quickly, in my district, the 5th district, we have the 3rd largest city, non-city, in the county, which is McKinleyville. And ever since Citrus Heights wanted to become a city, certain laws were put into place that the legislature, Sacramento in particular, the city of Sacramento was very opposed to that happening for a number of reasons, revenue sources, et cetera. And it created kind of a backlash that has made it very difficult for communities to incorporate today. I've had some great conversations with Senator McGuire, and he has a number of communities in his district that should be cities probably, and the people in those areas very much want that local control that a city gives them, because that's one of the primary reasons for that, along with many others. But interestingly, Santa Rosa very much supported Windsor becoming an incorporated city, and so it's kind of been back and forth. But I would ask that we consider in our legislative platform some legislation that supports communities to work to have local control and their ability to incorporate. And the two areas that keep coming up all the time are, one, to have more reasonable accommodations in regards to revenue neutrality, not 20 or 30-year alimony situations, things like that. But of course, we don't want the county to suffer in regards to incorporation. So my understanding is there's some work that could be done in that arena. The other one is that new cities ought to be able to get their share of vehicle license fees. That's a huge revenue source for existing cities, and why a new city shouldn't get that, again, there's some background there without belaboring it. But those are the two areas that keep coming up as we're discussing incorporation in McKinleyville. And we're really making good headway on that issue with gathering data, so we can have that informed discussion in our community rather than people immediately assuming, oh, my taxes will go up. Well, only if you vote to raise your taxes, right? So there's a lot of misunderstanding around that subject. But we now have Cal Poly Humboldt coming in to renew a study that was done 20 years ago to look at, you know, what are the financial data telling us about the ability to incorporate. And I and many people believe that just like 20 years ago, it was feasible at a 50-50 split with the county. That was just a tentative look at it. And McKinleyville has certainly gained a lot more revenue sources in the last 20 years. So it really comes down to what does the community want? And ultimately, there's a LAFCO process, and it would come before a vote for the community if they want to incorporate or not. But those are two items that I've heard would help that process. Another one we heard when you started out, the power distribution issue, which is all over the news recently with Southern Humboldt in particular. And I find it quite amazing that while this is happening, we also have PG&E trying to surcharge solar people who are grid tied, who want to produce energy and put it into the grid. So something about that, I don't know all the micro details, but it just, I find that quite bizarre, I guess. And then the last one is, I think we all know that rural areas in particular struggle with enough hospitals, medical professionals, specialists. Housing is a piece of that puzzle, but there are many other things like capacity of our local healthcare system and hospitals. We're looking at adding maybe 7,000 to 10,000 people at Cal Poly Humboldt, and we're already under supported with our medical care, including our mental health care. And staff, I just have to say, DHHS staff are amazing. Our nurses, our doctors are amazing, and I spent a lot of time over there in the last couple of weeks. So it's kind of hit home for me. But, you know, what they tell me at the hospitals is that, yes, COVID put a big strain on the hospitals, but actually it's the psychiatric referrals that are the biggest part of that strain. And 5150s being dropped off at the ER room, nurses being accosted, all kinds of things. So, you know, Humboldt is really a regional center for Trinity, Del Norte, Humboldt, Mendocino. I think a lot of people recognize that. And I would very much like to see, and I'm going to be having conversations with our staff as well as Senator McGuire and others about how can we get some funding to create a new, modern, integrated, high-capacity mental health facility that has more than 16 beds, like 50 beds, juvenile beds, things like that. So I don't know a lot about how we go about that. I've got a lot of work to do to talk with staff and others. We've got a facilities master plan. We haven't really gotten back to that for the last couple of years, another COVID result. But those are the things that really rise to the top for me that I wanted to share with you. Thank you.
Yeah, through the chair, if I may, on that last item, I work on that, psychiatric issues, pretty much every day. And so I think we should have a follow-up if we can find the time, because there have been some pretty interesting developments over the last 3 or 4 years that I'd like to pass along in person. Yeah.
Yeah, it just seems to me that if we created that facility with 50 beds and juvenile beds, because right now, if your children are having an issue, they go off to Santa Rosa, right? Worst time of all, you want to be there, right? So that would free up 50 beds in the hospitals, you know, if we had that capacity. It doesn't happen overnight, and we have some great assets, like we own that whole block across the street with just a parking lot on it. Imagine something different, like 5 stories, integrated. Anyway, look forward to talking with you more. Thank you for indulging me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
All right. I'm just going to add a little bit of history, nothing about your legislative stuff. Anyone who doesn't know, this is the last time I get to say this. Some may remember Don Peterson, our former supervisor. I know Supervisor Bohn does for sure, who actually served with my father. And he was one of the founders of the company that has now become the very long name. Shaw, Yoder, Antwi, Schmelzer, and Lang.
Yeah.
I got it. Good, I got you all.
Yeah.
But so it's always fun. I know taking a Zoom meeting in there when Zoom started during COVID, I made sure that Don Peterson was in my background. Supervisor Bohn caught that too. But it was kind of fun. So I've loved working with you guys.
Yeah.
And you're not rid of me.
No.
No, you're not. So.
Thank you, Madam
All
Chair.
right. Any other questions or comments before we go to the public? If you are watching on TV, please, or video, or however you're watching us, you should be pressing *9 now to raise your hand if you did want to make a comment. We've got a quiet group so far today. So any other supervisor questions before we go to public comment? Supervisor Bohn?
Well, I think, and I know Supervisor Madrone's aware of this, we received last year, I think, in excess of $6 million for a treatment facility for juveniles. And it is now coming to fruition. Property is bought. The doctor has left the area, but he's still very involved with the program. But that is moving along very nicely with extreme help from our DHHS. And it got a lot of not in my backyard stuff from a few places, but it looks like it's moving along. And that is a big option. And I agree with you. It'd be great to have 50 beds, but we're the smallest county that has 16 beds. And with that, being rural, where it's usually a draw, getting the medical professionals here to what you're doing. I mean, like our medical professionals are what Connie Stewart and what Humboldt State at the time, or University of Humboldt, now Cal Poly and whatever, has done with the nursing program, and then our new residency program, which is in its 3rd year, is making huge differences. So we're getting there, but I appreciate all those thoughts.
All right. So going to the public comment portion now. Is there anyone who would like to comment who happens to be in our audience? All right. We'll go to those on the phone.
Madam Chair, we have no callers or no hands
No hands
raised.
up. Okay. Yeah, I see callers, but no hands up. All right. So go back to the board. And would you like, Supervisor Bushnell, sorry.
Well, I was just going to make a motion that we receive the report.
Okay. what I was going to ask for. Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second that with some comment. That's okay.
Did you want to compliment? Okay, Supervisor Wilson?
I just want to thank you guys for coming again this year, and it was good to have some time with you yesterday. And I appreciate your availability to us. I want the public to know that that we don't just communicate with you one time a year. Actually, we communicate with you guys quite a bit, and you help set us up with meetings and other things and people to meet and talk to about our issues in Sacramento. I appreciate that, and working on talking with you about some housing issues related around the RENA numbers, and I wanted to mention that again today, the regional housing assessment, needs assessment numbers, and how that is not necessarily regional in its approach because it's divided up by all the different jurisdictions, and so we're going to have to see about how we can work better with our cities to actually address housing where it needs to go, so it has the least impact and is the most affordable to build. So I appreciate that, and so we'll keep working on it.
All right, thank you. That's all? Okay, so I guess we have to vote on it first. I'm not sure what happens if we refuse to accept your presentation. I've always wondered.
We walk out in shame.
All right, I think we're ready.
Okay, Supervisor Bohn? Yes. Supervisor Bushnell?
Yes.
Supervisor Wilson?
Yes.
Supervisor Madrone?
Yes.
And Supervisor Bass?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries 5-0.
All right, thanks, you guys. So we have 6 minutes till the next item. I don't think the next item coming from a supervisor will go quite that quickly. I'd like to ask our CIO, is there anything of the other two that are not time set that you think will get done in 5 minutes?
It might take a couple minutes over 5, but I think that we could probably
Maybe by 10 minutes?
put the HR item in there. Yeah, it's fairly.
Since Zach is here, I was thinking that could be the one to go. So we're going to mix up a little bit. We're going to move to item department report. The first one from Human Resources about resolution updating employee procedures and leave accruals, et cetera. So welcome, Zach. Excuse me, I should use your title a bit.
That's okay.
You're still Zach.
Is this on? That's okay. I like Zach. Zach's fine.
Mr. Zach. Go ahead.
Good morning, board members. I will try to make this go fast. So this item before you is in response to some resolutions that your board passed in early 2020 at the start of the COVID pandemic. In early 2020, you passed various resolutions providing for additional benefits for employees related to the pandemic and the local emergency. And on April 12th, your board terminated that local emergency. So in response to that, we are now, in a sense, reinstituting a lot of those modified benefits that were changed with those resolutions. Of note, this is putting leave caps back on our leave banks, those being vacation, administrative leave, use lose holidays, overtime compensation for exempt employees. Exempt employees don't normally get overtime compensation, but in response to the emergency could be eligible for that. There's also emergency sick leave available under the Family First Coronavirus Response Act. Technically, that was supposed to stop per the act at the end of 2020. However, that actually has continued up to this point. And then probably most notable in this is what we're going to do with all the vacation time that is over the cap. So for those employees who have vacation time over the set cap, and that can change based upon your longevity here with the county, essentially, we're going to move, or we are recommending that we move that vacation time, and this is where it gets a little confusing, plus 80 hours into the holiday bank. So that will give people the opportunity to continue to accrue time and not essentially butt up against their cap. And that will go into a holiday bank, which doesn't have a cap on it, and so they can keep that for as long as they work here for the county. There will still be SB 114 COVID leave available. That is still in place. It is set to expire on September 30th. However, it's anticipated that the governor will sign a bill to extend that to the end of this year. And then lastly, something that we've added to this item is allowing you to authorize myself or my designee to just implement and administer these benefits rather than having to bring them back to your board every time a new COVID rule is made. A lot of these things are instituting a benefit bank or some sort of CalOSHA regulation, and we don't really have a lot of say in the matter, and that will allow us to just implement them a lot faster. Lastly, I will mention that I did attend the Occupational Health and Safety Standards Board meeting on Thursday, where they were talking about making permanent COVID regulations. They're calling them permanent, however, it was permanent for the next 2 years, where they would continue contact tracing and various other pieces of these emergency temporary standards that they have in place now. I strongly encourage them to stop contact tracing as much as we want to have a safe workplace for our employees. It is proven to not actually provide the outcome that I think it is intended. It's very clear in the data that we have that when masks came off, that's when the COVID cases went up, and they've maintained. So with that, that is pretty much all we have on this item, and I wanted to see if you had any questions.
Great, thank you, Zach. Any questions from board members? Supervisor Bohn?
So when you're talking about switching this banked time around and everything else, is that also go into a position, or do the caps still stay on when we terminate or resign? Is that money payable upon your separation from the county? So we're giving a, okay, because sick leave was made for when you got sick. It wasn't made to be banked.
Right. Yeah.
And so and it's been, not that anybody's ever done that, but we've all heard the stories about it being abused and things like that. So I'm just trying to wonder exactly. So this is when you say bank, this is bankable. You get to withdraw it when you separate from the county?
Exactly, yeah. So it's just applies to the vacation bank. So anything above the vacation bank cap for any employee will go into the holiday bank. And yes, at separation, an employee would be paid out for those hours. It's essentially banked property.
I thought so. I just want clarification.
And as far as the sick leave, there are a very few number of employees who I think were hired prior to 1991 who can still get their sick leave paid out, but very few of those still exist, and it doesn't really apply here.
I didn't know if that changed that. Yeah.
No other questions? Supervisor Madrone and then Wilson.
Yeah, so you're seeking a motion to follow the recommendations in the staff report?
That is correct.
I would so move that we adopt Resolution 22, whatever the number is, rescinding employee benefits that were modified as a result of the proclaimed local emergency in response to COVID-19. And number 2, authorize the Director of Human Resources or their designee to implement and administer any future state or federally required benefits or extension of benefits related to COVID-19 after consultation with County Council and the County Administrative Office. And the reason I read it is I think when we redid our rules, Chair and myself, and I think the board as a whole, agreed, a lot of people watching this, they don't know what it says if we just say adopt staff recommendations. So just for the benefit of the public, I've read them into the record. So I move that.
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. I will go to public comment now. I don't think so, but is there anyone in the audience who'd like to comment on this item? All right, seeing no one, we'll go to those on the phone. We have the two callers, but no hands are up.
Correct.
All right, so we will go back to the board. We have a motion and a second. We can go ahead and proceed to vote unless someone has another comment to make. Nope. Nikki?
All right, Supervisor Madrone.
Yes.
Supervisor Bass.
Yes.
Supervisor Bohn.
Yep.
Supervisor Bushnell,
Yes.
and Supervisor Wilson.
Yeah.
Thank you. Motion passes 5-0.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Zach. So for anyone who's watching, we have a lot of time sets today, so we will be, if you're looking at the agenda and you think something's next, likely it's not, because there could be time sets in the way. So just for people to understand that, this is going to be something we need to keep track of what's happening during the day, because we just never know how long time sets are going to last. But that does lead me to multiple time sets that we have for 10:15 that come to us from County Council. So I'd like to please ask County Council, Deputy County Council Scott to please brief us on those.
Thank you, Chair Bass. It is the intention of the board to meet in closed session pursuant to California Government Code Section 54956.9D1 in order to discuss existing litigation in the cases of Richard M. Leonard Jr. versus Superior Court for the County of Humboldt, case number A164631, Molly Conso versus City of Eureka et al., case number 21-CV-04480-RMI, and White Circle Commerce LLC et al. Versus County of Humboldt, Humboldt County Superior Court case numbers CV2000-513 and CV2000-623. It is also the intention of the board to meet in closed session pursuant to California Government Code Section 54957.6 in order to review the county's position and instruct its designated labor negotiators.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone in the public who's here with us that wishes to comment on these closed session items? All right, I'll go to those on the phone. Do we have anyone with hands up? Nikki, I do not see any hands up for those items. So before we go into closed session, do we have an estimate of time?
The fun game of when shall we return? I am going to say hopefully right around the noon hour, and I'm cautiously optimistic that it's 10:15 right now, about 2 hours.
Okay, and we could end up here more quickly. I'm just telling, if somebody, yes, Supervisor Wilson?
Would that include having lunch or not?
We'll probably during, go ahead, you tell them.
I think that, how long do you think yours?
Yeah, we're going to have lunch.
Yeah, I think that will offer at least a half an hour lunch break for you.
Were we still, okay, I'm going to talk with you about that during the break, by the way. So, all right, so we don't have any public comment on that. We're back to us going, I say we go into closed session. And we'll see we might get back sooner. Not that that's happened this year, but might happen. Yes, Supervisor Madrone.
Madam Chair, so given those estimates, it sounds like we're going to do closed session and then have a half hour or so for lunch, which puts us back here somewhere between 12:30 and 1:30, and we have a 1:30 time set, I believe. And so it's likely that other issues on the agenda would come after that 1:30 time set, just for the public's.
Well, and we also have a 2:30 time set or
Right.
2 something.
Right.
Maybe we should have a working lunch. I think we talked about that before, the way this is looking. Anyway, I would just say for people who are wishing to, just to be aware, because this is a constantly changing, unfortunately, situation today. It's government. Yeah. Yes, CEO Hayes.
Nope, that's
Okay.
great. I think for the public to tune in around noon and
then go from
patiently wait for your board to return.
All right. Okay. What?
We won't be back up on the dais before noon then, that's what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Well, we'll be back around then. That's the most important part. All right, so prior to the 1:30 time set, we're going to try to squeeze in another item. Oh, and there's no report out of closed session yet because we're going back into closed session, in case anybody's wanting to know. All right, so we're going to department head reports, and this one comes to us from Planning and Building, and it's about the extension, the Safe Homes program. So Director Ford?
Thank you, Chair Bass, members of the Board of Supervisors. John Ford with Planning and Building Department, presenting the Safe Homes program. Safe Homes is a program that is kind of an amnesty program. It allows people that have built houses without permits to come in and obtain permits without imposition of penalties. It dates back to the 2014 housing element, where there was an encouragement for people to legalize their homes so that could protect and maintain the housing stock. The program has been used, maybe not hugely, but there are property owners who have taken advantage of it. It does not cost the county anything to implement it because people do pay for the building permit associated with it and for the cost of getting their septic approved. The program provides the property owners a path to obtaining permits without fear of penalty, and staff recommends that the Board of Supervisors extend the program through December of 2027. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Director Ford. Supervisor Madrone, and then Supervisor Bohn.
I move that we adopt the resolution of the Board of Supervisors of the County of Humboldt extending the Safe Homes program through December 31st, 2027, and I commend staff on their work on this program.
And is there a second?
Second.
Supervisor Bohn?
I have questions that I can get answered later on. Won't affect my vote on this at all.
Okay. So at this point, yeah, we'll go into open this up for public comment. Is there anyone here who wants just to comment on this item? All right, seeing none. I do not see any hands up on the,
No, Madam Chair, there's no hands up.
all right. We'll go back to the board. We do have a motion that's been seconded. Doesn't sound like a lot of conversation. I think we're ready to vote.
Ready for a vote?
Yeah.
Okay, Supervisor Bohn?
Yep.
Supervisor Bushnell?
Yes, and thank you to staff for bringing it forward.
Supervisor Madrone?
Yes.
Supervisor Wilson?
Yes.
And Supervisor Bass?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 5-0.
Wow, that's perfect. We're actually at 1:30 time set at 1:30. This is totally not normal. Up there it says 1:30. Okay, I have to ask County Council. We have to go back. Can we fix that? Can we fix that clock? From here it says. Okay, can we fix that clock so at least from this angle it's on the 6th?
How about Supervisor Bohn want to go ahead and ask his questions now? Maybe we can use up 3 minutes.
Well, here, put that item to.
No, item's over, and I just, no, it was just, it's a great program. We need to get more people involved with it. If we make it more difficult, it'll go away. So the whole idea behind this was to bring people into the fold so we have an idea where they're at and we know their structure is safe.
And while we're using time, can I request, well, it's not going to matter, I won't be here like forever, but a digital clock up there would be really much simpler to make sure it's on the right time, just saying.
Emailing somebody right now for it.
Lovely, thank you. If I can do anything for this, in the last few minutes, that was my thing. Yes, Supervisor Madrone.
Well, using up 1 more minute or so. So with SB 9, I believe it is, I know it's not on the agenda, so we can't take any actions, but I'm just thinking, is there a plan to maybe bring that forward before the board?
I don't think we're supposed to even, getting a vision, I'm getting a look from.
Okay, no problem. Okay. Instead of trying to fill the time. All right, thank you.
We're almost at 1:30. We got 30 more seconds to go.
It's be a perfect time for Supervisor Madrone to thank the United States Forest Service and CDF for a 42,000 acre fire with no structures, and there's 5 inches of snow sitting at the summit at Shasta right now from night before last.
You're absolutely right. Well, we can't take actions, but you're absolutely right. It was a phenomenal effort. We were so lucky that that fire started when there was only the McKinney fire, which is already kind of put out. We had 2,500 firefighters there, and they did save the town, literally saved the town.
All right.
And it's kind of hard to say, but in fact, it was a beneficial burn for the most part. It really burned up a lot of ground debris, and we're very thankful. Thank you, Supervisor Bohn, for bringing that up.
Well, and that was twofold. This was also Sabel and the Fire Safe Council.
And CAL FIRE.
They were amazed. The Fire Safe Council was but they were amazed how fire-ready the housing was up there.
All right.
All right, there we go.
So there was not any, that's good. We just had that was a special announcement. Yes, 1:30. Yes, thank you very much. So we'll move on to our 1:30 time set. Yeah, finish that. Oh, from Planning and Building, it's a cost recovery hearing. Director Ford, this doesn't say it's a public hearing, but I want to make sure, is it a public hearing?
We're treating it as a public hearing, yes.
Okay, because I didn't have that in the stuff here. So,
Yeah.
okay, if we're treating it as a public hearing, I will open it then as a public hearing, and then I'll turn it over to staff.
Thank you, Chair Bass, members of the Board of Supervisors, John Ford, Karen Manel, Christine Werner with the Planning and Building Department to address the cost recovery hearing for Summit Ridge. We're joined by Connie Beck and Carrie Strzok with Department of Health and Human Services. This item was continued to allow staff to work with the property owner to determine if there were things that could be done to protect the property owner's interests in light of the abatement which has occurred and the fact that material was being moved back onto the property even during the last cost recovery hearing. Before I say too much more, I do want to say that even prior to this item being brought before the board on August 23rd, the Department of Health and Human Services staff had gone above and beyond to try to work with the property owner to help her make good decisions to protect her interests. The Sheriff's Department was also involved in that. This has truly been a situation where the county departments have worked collaboratively and cooperatively. And so I do want that to be understood, that even going into the last hearing, there had been an extreme amount of coordination to try to bring about a good result. Unfortunately, this is a situation where the property owner, even though help has been offered, has rejected the help. We met with the property owner several times, met with her son and the property owner a couple times, and tried to offer solutions. We thought we had a solution lined up, but ultimately the property owner rejected that solution. So unfortunately, sadly, we are returning here with the property owner having rejected taking any action that would protect her, and finding ourselves in a position where we need to recommend that the Board of Supervisors confirm the nuisance abatement assessment. We're happy to answer any questions, and the Department of Health and Human Services can address maybe some of the questions that you might have relative to what happens in situations like these.
And I do have a question if the person in question, is anyone on Zoom representing the individual? I don't see any hands up. Okay.
We anticipated them being here in the chambers today, but they're not here.
All right. Well, if they happen to be listening in or watching from home, press *9 so we know you were there. We'll call in and then press *9. Okay. Any Connie, Director Beck. Oops.
Hi, Connie Beck, Health and Human Services Director. In the last meeting, there were some questions about adult protective services and the services provided in these types of situations. And for that, I'd like for Carrie Schrock to just give you some examples of services that are provided in these type of cases. Are you interested in that?
Yes. Just for, curious.
Hello, hi, I'm Carrie Schrock and I'm a manager with Adult Services, and one of the programs under me is Adult Protective Services. So I was here during the discussion about this particular case, and I can't speak to particulars in any one specific case, but I can talk to you kind of in general about what Adult Protective Services does and kind of when we can intervene, when we can't intervene, and then if you have questions in general, I can hopefully answer those, but not, I just would ask that you don't ask a question specific to the case that's on today, just for confidentiality reasons. So we investigate When we get a call regarding abuse or neglect of an elder or a dependent adult, we assign a social worker as long as it meets criteria for investigation. In a case where there are concerns about the living situation of somebody, like their housing situation, maybe they're in an unsafe situation due to the conditions of the home, or people who might be in the home, or they're not able to get their basic needs met in the home, we do offer a variety of services to help the person. And some of the things that we do, we offer referrals to various community resources. One of the kind of common things that we do is assist with locating alternate housing for people. Sometimes people just need a short-term option while maybe their house is being repaired, or they're getting, specific medical needs met, getting their house more ADA accessible or something like that. Maybe somebody has, a problem with rodent infestation or plumbing or something like that that doesn't work, and we can temporarily rehouse them while we go in and assist with that. Sometimes people might be behind on some of their bills. One of the things that we've been seeing a lot with the pandemic is a lot of fraud and scams, and so people maybe aren't able to meet their ends meet, so we can assist with that financially. Some of the things within our, that limits what we're able to do is adult protective services are voluntary for almost all of our cases. The only way that somebody can basically say, no, I don't want your services, and we still continue to work with them, is if they do not have the capacity to make their own decisions. So that would be somebody, and that has to actually be determined by, maybe it's somebody who is being held up at Semper Virens, and the doctor there has deemed that they cannot make their own decisions and they're going into some sort of conservatorship, or maybe there is somebody that has cognitive decline, is further along with later stages of dementia. Sometimes clients who are also clients of the Red Coast Regional Center, maybe an adult with pretty severe on the autism spectrum, somebody like that. And that again, we need to have a medical person say that that person does not have the capacity to make their own decisions, and then we go through the process of a conservatorship. So that's not the majority of our cases, and when that happens, most of the time we're collaborating with the public guardian to have that happen. So one of the things in the code is that, and it says specifically in the handbook from CDSS, the California Department of Social Services, is that the Adult Protective Services Program is not intended to interfere with the lifestyle choices of elders or dependent adults, nor to protect those individuals from the consequences of such choices. So there are many times that we go out and we meet with people, and we can kind of see what potentially could happen if they don't address what's going on in the home right now, and they will say thanks, but no thanks, go away. And we don't have any choice other than to honor that person's decision. A lot of times what we will do is say, please reach out to us if you change your mind. Here are some resources that might assist with whatever is going on in your household. Another example is sometimes people ask us to help out financially with something that's going on in their lives. We oftentimes will help. Maybe there's somebody that lives in a trailer that, for instance, maybe needs a ramp so that they can access it better. Maybe they don't have a working toilet. We will go and have that assessed first, because we're not going to go put a lot of money into repairing something if that trailer is actually, even with those repairs, is not going to be able to be inhabited safely and is going to be condemned. So we're not going to spend $5,000 repairing something that is just going to get, destroyed in 6 months. So other times we have people who maybe have people that aren't really considered safe living in that home, whether they're family or, what people kind of term as squatters, which isn't, maybe the appropriate term. But we get calls saying they keep letting these people into their houses. They're selling drugs out of the houses. They're doing unsafe things. They're bringing all these people in. And if that person has full capacity and says, I'm fine with it, we can't make people kick somebody out of their house. So that's kind of the parameters. We do work, I have a great staff of social workers who does everything they can possible to try to engage with people and get them to accept help. We sometimes get multiple referrals for somebody, and maybe they say no the first 5 times and then say yes. So that's it in a nutshell.
Well,
I keep going on and on,
actually,
so.
it was very helpful. Anyone have any questions from the board? No, that was very helpful because it is the situation. Supervisor Bohn?
Crappy job, and I thank you for answering my phone calls when I call and ask
Sure.
questions, and they do get back to you. So, but it's an ugly job because when we call, it's got really bad.
Yep. All right, thank you. Well, yes, Supervisor Bushnell.
I just want to thank you for the explanation. I don't think I've met you yet, so
Okay.
nice to meet you.
And I've bothered you multiple times. So, all right, thank you.
Anything else? No questions?
Not yet. If we,
Okay.
wait, well, come back. There's another one. There is one.
For Director Ford.
Director Ford. No, you can go sit back down now. Wait, no. Director Ford, there's a question for you.
I just got my question answered. I want to make sure that they had been notified and they just walked in, so.
Actually, you can make a motion before we go. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to confirm the proposed nuisance abatement assessment on the property located at 2718 Summit Ridge Drive, Humboldt Hill. And do I need to keep going, John?
I think
And the second is adopt the resolution to confirm the proposed nuisance abatement assessment against Jessica Adams pursuant to Humboldt County Code, Section 351-1.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, so public comment. I'm going to go through those on the phone first. But yes, hold on just a moment. We're going to go to county council.
Are we going to give the?
If they come back in.
Okay.
Coming in and leaving was a challenge. We still have a motion we have a motion and a second, so that still stands. Ma'am, or family, you may speak. Did you want to speak to the board before we make our discussion?
Well, we had car trouble, and we went all the way up the cut, and we needed an attorney, and we didn't know you'd be here.
Okay, but well, you're here now. If you want to come up in a max 10 minutes presentation, and that's maximum. You don't have to take that long. If you can just tell us.
You want me to sit down?
Would you like to speak?
Let him speak.
All right.
My name is Michael Acosta. I'm an attorney, local attorney, and I was approached by the family that's the subject of this proposed action. I do have...
Excuse me, Supervisor Bushnell didn't catch your name.
It's Michael Acosta.
Michael Acosta.
Okay, and I do have handouts for the supervisors. Is that allowed? Is it permissible?
Can you speak in the mic, please?
Yes, sorry. I do have a handout for each of you. The original, I will have the property owner sign
Okay,
for
thank you, Ms.
submission to the record. And
Sorry.
I'm
Yes.
not going to read this verbatim because it's a letter from the owners, so it would sound odd coming from me, a third party. However, I will go over the general points of their response to the cost proposal that's being assessed against her. Number one, there should be a deduction for theft or conversion of personal property. There was a substantial amount of personal property that was taken from the occupants that was valuable, that was not debris. Bins were divided into being kept, trash, and recycle. There was at least one entire bin of personal property that was functional, non-trash, that was taken, and there should be an offset for the market value or the replacement value of that property. There were ATVs, cherry pickers, 2 John Deere seeded lawnmowers, and there are several other items that are listed here: welders, generators, power tools, engine stands, things like that that are clearly not trash or debris. So they're asking for an offset for that conversion to avoid immediate litigation with the contractor, between the property owner and the contractor, which probably wouldn't involve the county, but it would involve the contractor. Two, there should be an adjustment of the labor rate. The labor rate on this bill is $100 per hour, which, by the way, is, I believe, still more than what the county pays appointed attorneys to do criminal defense. $65 an hour, and I was doing it back then. I don't know if that's the same rate, but $100 an hour for unskilled labor to pick up trash, I don't think there's any private employer that pays that, that I know of. Prevailing wages, I understand. Davis-Bacon, I understand. This is basically an indemnification by the property owner by a private contractor. It should be billed at commercially reasonable rates, and $100 an hour for unskilled labor to pick up trash does not sound commercially reasonable to me. Three would be the deduction. They're requesting a deduction of the government staff and time and costs. I believe that what is billed on the, what is included in the bill is government staff time and costs. And this is a property owner. She's elderly. She's been paying property taxes to the County of Humboldt for many years, I'm assuming. Is that correct? How long have you been a property owner? How long have you owned that property? For several years.
35 years.
She's been paying property taxes. To bill her for the staff time involved in this is double billing, really. She's already paid her portion through taxes. That's what the taxpayers pay the government for. That's why we have a socialized system of abatement for people who need it. And in this case, it's an elderly property owner. There's got to be some other pool of funding that can be drawn on to out of some programmed elderly fund that can be used to assist in the abatement costs to refund the code enforcement unit. Those are the three areas that I think are egregiously out of balance on the bill, leading to a $40,000 bill. The other 2 points that are included in this are that there was no bidding process in this situation. There was a general bidding process, I understand. I read the code enforcement's policies or their history. They've taken bids for the series of task orders, but this particular task order was not bid per property. So that really opens the door to collusion. As all of you know, since you're county supervisors, the general business practice is to take 3 bids for any sort of large contract. And that ensures that our free market mechanism works, that there is no collusion, that there's no price fixing. There's some price, I believe there's price fixing at $100 an hour for labor. That's price fixing. So you should consider the fact that there was not a bidding in this process for this property. And finally, I believe this is, by county staff, a form of elder abuse. She is elderly. She's been threatened with her home. She's been told that she has to sell the property and that today's the deadline to list the property for sale. And that's wrong. That should be a referral to Adult Protective Services against the county staff. And I'm here to stand up against that. I didn't mean to get involved in this, but since she was late, here I am. So thank you for your time. I hope you would consider her sentiments in adjusting the bill. She's asking that someone stand up to make a motion to adjust this bill and save an elderly person's home. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And so now we'll go.
And this is the signed copy for the record. Is there,
Okay.
Who I give
Thank
to
you.
staff?
And I would say, if you want to stay on for questions, that's, at this point in time, we'll be asking anyone for response to questions. So I'm not going to go to public comment yet because I want to see what staff may have as a response. Is that, okay. County council has these beady eyes when you look at me like that. It just mean no. Very wise, knowing eyes. Where are we?
Okay. So it's going through the items that were raised, starting with the bins, is that all the bins were understood to be trash bins. They were not being sorted to keep things. In terms of the labor rate, that is the loaded rate. And often that's not necessarily the rate that an employee gets paid. That's the cost of having the employee out there working. When you look at the rates for the planning and building department, our rates are far more than what we pay an employee. In terms of deduction from government, from the bill for government staff time, part of the process is to charge in these situations for the staff time associated with the cost of doing the abatement. That's part of the overall cost. Mr. Acosta had it correctly, that we did go through a bidding process. This is an item, the cost of this is less than $45,000, which in and of itself wouldn't require a bidding process. And accusation of elder abuse is really an unfortunate accusation. As I mentioned earlier, and will reaffirm, I believe that not only the Planning and Building Department staff, but all of the staff that have been involved in this have gone out of their way to try to help the property owner to make sure that her interests are well represented.
Thank you, Director Ford. Supervisor Bohn?
And to that effect, that's why we have the head of Adult Protective Services here that has been involved in this process all the way through, so everybody's rights were, I would imagine, so they were dignified and protected.
All right, anything to add, Director Ford, at the moment?
Not at the moment.
Okay, so I will go to the public comment period officially now. I see no hands up on the phone or video or on what? I see no hands up.
I know.
So I'll go to those in the room here. This is the time if you wish to comment on this item. There's a 3-minute time limit, so if somebody wants to add any more or speak. All right, we'll go back to the board. We do have a motion and a second. So is there additional conversation? Supervisor Bohn?
You want to read the motion again? No, excuse me. Could the clerk please write?
On the record, sorry about that. That the Board of Supervisors confirm the proposed nuisance abatement assessment on the property located at 7218 Summit Ridge Drive, Humboldt Hill, APN 306-291-018, CE 19-0400, in the amount of $38,778.16 in accordance with section 351-20 titled Cost Recovery Hearing of Title III, Division 5, Chapter 2 of the Humboldt County Code. And number 2, adopt the resolution to confirm the proposed nuisance abatement assessment against Jessica Adams pursuant to Humboldt County Code Sections 351-1.
Thank you. And with that, to Director Ford, does this say she has to sell the house today or put it up for sale today? Is that in this?
No.
This is just basically when the house does sell, we're entitled to the damages?
No. What this says is that there is a lien being imposed on the property that is required by the county code that will be collected as part of the tax assessment. And so if it's not paid, then the property could result in a situation where it's being sold to repay the tax debt on the
And that
property.
would be, if she does not pay that, then that would give her a 5-year window to pay it as unpaid taxes. Is that right?
3 years. 3 years.
Okay. All right. And just so you know, I was up there yesterday, and I appreciate the fact that you've paid property taxes for 35 years. But the people at the end of the street, across the street, and the people I talk to, they've been paying their property taxes for a long time too, and are having to deal with the situation that is. And I truly believe this isn't. We've heard this repeatedly. This isn't Jessica Adams' doings, but your name's the only one on the title. It's the only person we can turn to. We can admonish a child or whoever you feel has brought everything that is the tinker or whatever the case may be. But I don't think the neighborhood cares. I think they want it cleaned up by whoever owns property. And that's the only person we have to go after.
All right, any other supervisors have a comment? Supervisor Madrone and then Bushnell.
So there was some question about the labor rate, but this is required to be paid at prevailing wages, is that correct? And the basic laborer rate is, what is it now, Supervisor Bohn? Well, and then you add to the benefits, I think it's like 50, 55 an hour approximately, plus then you have the overhead and stuff. So I know when I bid contracts in the last few years, it's, you know, you're looking at $80 to $100 an hour for a laborer hour when you're in a prevailing wage system. It's unfortunate, and there was so many months where the county staff tried to work with the property owner to get it cleaned up over and over again. There was ample opportunity to set aside the things that wanted to be saved, that were of value, and none of those things happened. It's very unfortunate, you know, that this ended up this way, but that's all. Thank you.
Supervisor Bushnell.
Thank you. So I also just wanted to confirm what Supervisor Madrone said that we did, you know, ask last time about a payment plan, and Jessica stated that she wasn't able to do that. I do have a question. I see the pictures are from 9/6, which is a few weeks back, and there's accumulated stuff already. Going forward, what are we going to do between now and to kind of make sure this doesn't get back up to where it was, because it seems like it's growing already?
Unfortunately, the path that it's on is we're going to complete the same, or we're going to start the same cycle again, where we're going to have to issue a notice to abate, notice of violation, go through the same process unless the site's cleaned up.
So currently, the last abatement that these amounts are coming to us today is closed. Is that correct?
This will close that, yes.
This will close that one notice. And given, is there a new case opened?
Not yet.
Not.
Yes.
Oops.
Yes, we have.
Okay. So, so this could happen all over again, and then we'd be back here again with another amounts of money.
And we did talk to Ms. Adams about that. That is something we desperately want to avoid.
Okay. So can I ask, in those discussions, since there is a case open, did you guys come up with a plan with Ms. Adams?
No.
No.
No, we're not. It's not where it's not. We're talking to Director Ford, I believe, or Maynell.
I believe that we did, and I believe that there was a solution that would be workable. And we left the meeting with an understanding of what was going to happen, and then we received a call a week later, on the 7th of September, indicating that that plan was not going to be pursued.
If I could ever lecture from the dais, it would be today, but I guess I can't. So, and I would be saying to the Miss Adams's son, but I can't. So, okay, thank you for that.
Supervisor Bohn, and then
And I have to think about the surrounding areas. So there is nothing we can do about the motorhome and the trailer in the next 3 years?
Go ahead.
No, our new case that we opened, we will be issuing an NTA, and we have the option of also issuing an NOV to address the trailers that have reappeared or reemerged.
And the motorhomes are reappearing too.
Motorhomes and the solid waste that is starting to reemerge on the site. Those do not have to wait until this case comes to its final conclusion for us to act on it.
Because my fear is we're going to act on this, and we're still, and I'm not changing anything, but we're going to say in 3 years there's a drop dead date, and we're going to, not you necessarily the case, but I mean, we're having a problem with, there's no incentive for them to clean this up until we come back in and clean it up again. And just because we've just by the looks of yesterday, what has changed in the last 10 weeks or 12 weeks or whatever.
Yeah, the incentives that we have available to us are to issue an NOV, which would motivate them to clean that up before penalties began to accrue. We didn't have penalties in this first case. And the other motivating factor, I would hope, would be that should we get to the point where we have to conduct a county abatement because they have not cleaned up the property and there's another charge against the property is going to be, more upside down than it will be after this lien is applied to the property. So as of right now, I think there's still probably some equity left in the property. As this goes on and things accrue, I think that the property owner will find that there's nothing left of value.
And last not least, when I was looking last night, what scares the heck out of me, because on the other side of the trees on the setback, there's a house. There's another house across the street. You have that motorhome accumulating, and I think there's people going in and out of it. It's going to get colder, and they're going to be heat source. That thing's going to go up in flames. It has tree overhang, and it is a very narrow road, so it's going to take, and at the top of Humboldt Hill, we're going to have a response time, and I don't think it will be the only structure in the neighborhood. And so we're getting to the point now that this isn't just a visual, this is an extreme fire danger. And I don't want to wait 60 days, 30 days, 90 days. This needs to be addressed, because if this catches on fire, this has been in front of us, and I worry about us as a county and our liability, because we are not addressing this fire issue. And I'm probably not helping our legal situation by saying I'm scared to death about a fire. But those things burn. Once that aluminum starts burning, it goes up quick. And we have the trees right next door. And they've got a lot of brown leaves on them, even though they look pretty good in this. But
Message received.
so I would love to at least go up there with Humboldt Bay Fire and say, do you consider this a risk?
Only if asked, ma'am. Sorry, we did have that opportunity before. If a supervisor does wish to speak with you, and I have to say, this is not something we want to do or like to do. These are not fun decisions, and we know that we all tried. The staff tried to work with you, and just believe that this is not easy for us either.
Well, she said if it went forward and backwards.
Okay, sir, you can't speak right now. We can ask you a question. Since we did close public comment and we did have the opportunity. So at this point, is there any other supervisors? We do have a motion and that's been seconded. We've had concerns mentioned for future. Nope. Okay, I think we're ready to vote. Yep, this has all been said. I think we're ready for a vote.
Okay, Supervisor Bushnell?
Yes.
Supervisor Wilson?
Yes.
Supervisor Bohn? Yes. Supervisor Madrone?
Yes.
And Supervisor Bass?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 5-0.
All right, so we're closing that public hearing. We have, should we start the next item? We have the one remaining before the 2:30 time set. I guess I'd ask, how time set, does the 2:30 have to go exactly at 2:30? If it's a little bit late, is that going to be okay? Which would you like to do, Madam CAO?
Yeah, it can go a little bit late. I do believe. I'll send our auditor a text right now and see.
Either that, or if we go back into closed session and finish that.
The individual your board wanted to speak with is not available from the 2 to 3 hour. So
okay, that makes it up. Makes our mind up. So that will now move us back in the agenda to an item brought to us by a supervisor and Supervisor Madrone. And it's regarding planning commissioner behavior during meetings and the importance of adherence to the rules of conduct. So this, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. I will hand this over to Supervisor Madrone since this was brought to us by you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Excuse me. So it is the subject matter, and some set of recommendations are included in our staff report. There was some error in getting this item agendized. I had asked for some other changes, but they ultimately didn't get in there. There was some apologies made by staff in regards to why that happened, but it doesn't really change it because those things would fall under number 4, take other appropriate action as necessary. So first, just to be clear, this agenda item is not about the Snyder Project, but it's about the actions of the chair of the Planning Commission, which we've received lots of correspondence, phone calls, and I reviewed in total both of the meetings that occurred on September 18th as well as the 1st. And it certainly did seem to me that the chair's actions and demeanor at those meetings showed a strong disregard for respect and decorum, with derogatory and racist remarks that were made by the chair towards local Native American tribes and representatives. And I want to take this opportunity to thank the local tribes for their incredible contributions to our community. We've really been making a lot of headway in our community in regards to working with our Native tribes and trying to heal some of the many, many injustices of the past. And I hope that we can sincerely continue doing that. You know, it's interesting, having a set of rules for the Planning Commission operations and a code of conduct and a diversity, equity, and inclusion policy, I think would help a lot. But if the commissioners or us as Board of Supervisors don't actually embrace these values, then rules and a policy do very little. We really have to take a look at our own actions because that's the only place we can actually change anything, is how we behave. I certainly try to embrace that standard, but we all make mistakes. There's no doubt about it. None of us are perfect by any means. We all have bad days and good days and things that we probably wish we hadn't said or done. I think last year I used a word very inappropriately and found myself sincerely apologizing for that just a week or so later. So none of us are above making mistakes. There is certainly a lot of truth to that. You know, about a year or two ago, there was a set of rules brought to the Planning Commission for their consideration, but they basically rejected acting on that and took no action on adopting these rules or policies. So at this point, we have a set of rules that Chair Bass and myself worked on for over a year with staff, and we adopted them, and then we adopted a code of conduct. I know as a county, we're working on a policy for equity, diversity, and inclusion. It's actually diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, and I think that's fantastic. But having policies and rules, again, don't really matter very much if we as individuals don't embrace what it says in there. So it's interesting that they did not move on taking on policies. So it seems to me that really at this point it's up to us, because the planning department and the planning director don't really govern the planning commission. That's us. That's our job. And so I do think that it is probably time to get together a set of rules and policies. And I believe our community is depending on us to do this and to embrace them, more importantly. And that may involve training. It may involve us changing our attitudes or how we think about some of these things. None of this stuff is easy. You know, culturally, we may have been brought up a certain way, but, you know, it's a new world here, and we're all trying our best to move forward. So moving forward, I would recommend that we direct staff to come back. I'm not making a motion here because I think we need to have some discussion here. So I'm not making a motion, but I do believe that we should recommend that staff come back soon with a set of rules, a code of conduct, and a diversity, equity, and inclusion policy for this board to consider for the Planning Commission. I would also recommend that we consider a censure of Chair Bongio's actions and statements as regards local tribes in reference to the Snyder Project, and that we also consider making a recommendation to the appointing supervisor for removal of Commissioner Bongio from the Planning Commission. But our current rules don't really allow us to do that as a board. That is each one of our prerogatives. These individuals serve at our pleasure, as they say, so to speak. So it really is up to the appointing supervisor to do that, or the individual to do that. I remember it wasn't just a few years ago when Kevin McKinney was planning commissioner appointed by Supervisor Bass, and a situation happened with some wetlands, some setbacks of environmentally sensitive habitat, And I was amazed at what he did. It's not Kevin, it's Kenny. Or is it Kevin? Kevin.
It's Kevin. I
Thank
think
you.
it's still Kevin.
Still Kevin, sorry.
There's three of them.
I like Kenny.
I thought it had a good ring to it. And in that case, he actually resigned and pulled himself out, and he said he didn't want to put you through the embarrassment of this, that. And it was interesting because after the fact, it turned out that he actually had not violated any laws. But he did what he thought was probably the best thing to do in that situation. I applaud him for that. I thought that was an amazing action. But of course, we're all individuals, and we each have choices to make in life, both as appointing supervisors as well as appointees. So I'm just going to leave it at that. I've said enough kind of an overview, and I look forward to this discussion with the board to see what we think are appropriate actions to take here today. So,
Thank you, Supervisor Madrone. I do notice we have Dr. Clark. I was going to go to our CAO first, because I do see members of the DEI team here. I didn't know if they just wanted to come up and comment or.
Sure, Chair Bass. We do have a diversity, equity, and inclusion team, which is headed up by Dr. Jeremy Clark and Neftali Rubio Mills. And they actually called me last week and asked that leadership within the organization formulate a letter to send to the tribes recognizing the efforts the county has put forward towards the DEI work and the commitment that the county will hold in those efforts, both for our organization and for our community, and really just showing support for the tribes who are valued community partners for the county. And so they are here because that may be something that comes of today's action, to ask that you, Chair Bass, sponsor a letter of that sort and sign it and send it off. And so they're available if you have any questions about their efforts or what that letter might entail.
All right, thank you. So, Supervisor Bushnell?
Thank you. Through the chair, my question is going to be for CAO Hayes. So I see one of the recommendations in here is to develop a code of conduct, and I know that a code of conduct was developed. It was about 4 years ago, and it came to the Planning Commission. And currently, I had spoke to you about this about 3 months ago. And is that already in the works?
That is in the works, yes, and we anticipate bringing that back to your board in October. Based on recent events, we are boosting the diversity, equity, inclusion language that is in that code of conduct, and we're also looking to make some recommendations as far as training and development opportunities for commissioners. This will not just be for this commission, but for all commissions that serve for the county, because I think it's really important that we all be held accountable and have a set of standards that we want to abide by.
I agree with that also, to not just be for Planning Commission, but to be for all our commissions. Okay, so that was the one question I had, that it's already in the process. So the recommendation is to direct staff to develop that, but it's already happening. So, okay, thanks.
And I just wanted to ask, I was still surprised that the Planning Commission had the ability to turn it down last time. So I'd like to make sure that there's no latitude for different committees, groups to do something other than what is this something we can impose?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, your board is the governing body, not just of the county, but of the commissions that serve at your will. And so you can definitely impose a code on them and hold them accountable to that code.
I'm just still surprised they didn't do it well, anyway. Old news. Yes, Supervisor Bushnell.
So along that lines, when I was asking about this and I spoke with council, it is in government code, I believe. Am I right or not, Scott?
What specific aspect are you?
The code of conduct, it is in government code that the planning commission specifically will have a code of conduct ran through this board for the planning commission.
I believe so.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
All right, Supervisor Madrone, then Wilson.
What code are we talking about?
This is in reference to the code of conduct, and it really just memorializes the fact that the board has that authority to impose a code of conduct on the planning commission specifically. However, that said, I think that's just to memorialize that. Your board, without a doubt, has the authority to govern your commissions.
Certainly. So that's what you were talking about, our code of conduct. Oh, state code, I think you were referring
Well,
to.
no, when I was asking about why the planning commission didn't have a code of conduct, and that Supervisor Bass said, I was amazed that they turned down to govern themselves. And when I was having the discussion with council, they said, well, it probably should have came through our board, as it's in government code, that we can impose codes of conduct on commissions. And so I just wanted to further have that conversation right now, that they can't refuse a code of conduct from us.
Understood.
Yeah.
Thank you for the clarification.
Supervisor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair Bass. I was just wondering, do we have any folks on the line for?
Since our stuff is not working, let me see. I see 5. So, are you looking for a?
I was just wondering, just to see where this is going. We do have I see on here, the censure for the with relationships to the planning commissioner, but then also, I mean, we could make, say, a recommendation to the commission itself to, ask that the commissioner be removed from chair. Is that a possibility? Can we do that? Is that a message that we can send or request?
So the code of conduct is going to lay out some very explicit routes to address misconduct. And we are still working to flush out some of those aspects of it, but it'll provide multiple avenues. Ideally, your chair is the one who would immediately address a conduct that was in violation of the code. In this situation, the chair is the subject at hand. So then we can line up some processes where it falls to the vice chair or empowers other commissioners to bring items forward, and then ultimately empowers your board to address such situations. We're also evaluating the overall makeup of the planning commission and overall. And so that may also offer and empower your board to make some modifications to that commission to make it a more effective government.
I was specifically seeking to empower the commission to make some decisions on that regard. But if we can't get there today, I think the list that has been put forth so far, which is censure the chair of the planning commission for basically the code of for the conduct and the words and the reprehensible language that was used. 2, I think it was to recommend DEI training, but I do have a question about that, which is where are we on that in terms of within the county with relationship to implementation of our own DEI with relationship to everything else. I'll have a side note on that because we have these volunteer committees that I think Supervisor Bushnell mentioned, and at some point, if we're going to be asking volunteer committees to do a lot of trainings, I want to at some point talk about some sort of stipend or something with regards to that, because we're asking volunteers in the community to do a lot, and I just want to make sure that we're being cognizant of their time, at least showing that we appreciate it. And then the code of conduct we're saying is coming back, and we have already asked for that, I believe, in a previous meeting. Have we not already, or is that just something we just know is kind of running through the system?
Yes, your board has spoke with me
Okay.
about that.
So maybe we just put it on the list as just very specific that we are expecting a planning commission code of conduct to come back. Just put it on the list, and then the letter that you're referencing, we can add that to the list of items that would be in a motion. Does that seem reasonable?
That seems very reasonable.
Okay.
In response to your comments on the training, you and I have spoke about this, and I have passed that forward to the team that I'm working on to create the code, to finalize the code of conduct.
Right.
I would ask Dr. Jeremy Clark to come up and maybe just give a quick overview of what the county is doing in terms of their DEI trainings, which we are pushing out to all of our employees,
Including us.
And yes,
Including
and the
us.
staff.
We're part of that.
And this is something that we anticipate incorporating into the code of conduct as a requirement for commissioners, at least annually, I think, to complete.
Welcome, Dr. Clark.
Hey, Chair Bass, good afternoon. Thank you for having me. My head always looks shiny when I'm in here. Yeah, so pleasure to appear before this body as always, just to give you an update as to sort of where we are with our diversity activities. So as we know, on July 19th, your board took a series of steps related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, one of which was mandating the inclusion of racial equity common terms to the mandatory training list. And so that was a DHHS created training, and their completion rate was about 75%, so placing the county at about half. We have seen significant interest in that course. We've seen some people proactively take that course, and then others are waiting until all hands training day, which is pretty expected this close to all hands training day. But in addition to that, I've had the honor of working with CAO Hayes, Director O'Hannon, to identify some additional diversity, equity, and inclusion related training opportunities. I'm proud to report that on this year on All Hands Training Day, we actually are going to offer a pretty significant offering of diversity, equity, and inclusion learning opportunities that really range from anything from, gender identity and gender expression to implicit or non-conscious bias. And some of these will be on the NeoGov platform, and others will be facilitated by actual consultants. So it's really exciting. In addition to that, your board directed that we establish a web presence, and by we I mean the Office of Human Resources. So Director O'Hannon is very passionate about that. We look to be moving that forward in the near future, and actually Naftali and I just left a session where she and I were examining the DHHS Racial Equity Strategic Plan and looking at how Central HR can sort of support that and build off of that. So a lot of really, really good, exciting stuff. And then as CAO Hayes pointed out, I actually have the pleasure of working with her on revising the Code of Conduct and introducing DEI-related language. So, so a lot of really exciting stuff happening on the DEI front. The one thing, if I may, and not just with respect to this current situation, but just to remind this body that on July 19th, we made a series of public pronouncements and commitments. And anytime any agent of the county operates in a manner that is inconsistent or antithetical with those, you will likely hear from our committee. Will certainly sort of take those issues under advisement and under consideration. And you may likely hear from me just indicating any concerns that we may have. And I just want to express that I am pleased to have that relationship, to be able to do that with CAO Hayes, Director O'Hannon, and your board. So hope that answers the question.
I think we might have a couple of questions. Hold on a second. Before we do that, I want to acknowledge that in the queue, I think I had Supervisor Bushnell and then Bohn on something earlier, but questions for Jeremy or Dr. Clark right now?
I don't have a question for you at this moment. I'm just going to.
Yeah, I know you have a first name, but
I do.
Doctor, while you're
Yeah,
here.
formality thing.
Supervisor Madrone may have a question.
There we go.
Thank you, Dr. Clark, and all of the members of the DEI team. Really appreciate all your work. You mentioned that if something happens, that you guys would certainly be discussing it, but I'm not sure I understand the exact process, because this week we actually got a formal complaint from the Wiyot tribe in regards to this recent situation. I'm assuming that goes to HR for investigation, but I mean, again, how does that work versus what you guys might do as a committee in regards to these kinds of infractions, or whatever you want to call them, reprehensible behavior and such?
Sure. So the formal complaint, so I work, again, as I pointed out, very closely with CAO Hayes and Director O'Hannon, and so anything that they feel like I need to be read in on, they pretty much do that, regardless of the time, whether it's through email or text. So anything that sort of, that I get, I will sort of take back to the committee and share. I have a great relationship with Neftali. Director Beck is my co-lead of the DEI committee, so we have a great relationship as well. And so essentially, you know, if I'm made aware of something, then, and it impacts our DEI activities or is antithetical, again, to our expressed values, then I usually just bring it up for discussion and we'll sort of talk it over. This situation was a little bit different only because the publicity with which it surrounded it, that everyone was aware, and we sort of felt like proactively, again, not with respect to anyone's participation on a board or commission or anything that is sort of within the political realm, but really just looking at it from the standpoint of, okay, here are our express values, and is this consistent with, is this behavior consistent with that? So,
Well,
I hope that answers the question.
I'm still a little confused. The formal complaints go to HR, is that correct?
The formal complaint came to me, and in county code, I have the authority to investigate any formal complaints that come to my attention. And so, yes, I am working with HR and county council to address those. It came in late yesterday, so I don't know what that path is right now, but we are certainly taking it seriously and working to address it as expeditiously as possible.
And so, as a committee, you would be making recommendations to us as a board and/or the CAO or HR, and kind of providing support to those mechanisms, basically, or?
Sure. So for a little bit of context, our committee came out of the Great Workplace Culture Change Initiative, and so that is concerned with the organizational culture of the county. So any recommendations, any actions that we take are really seen from sort of that meta-cultural level lens, which is why, again, when we look at the behavior of any agent of the county and we say, hey, this is sort of antithetical to our values, that's why we start to have that discussion and bring it forward. So our charge is not necessarily to respond to complaints from the community regarding any potential infractions. Mine personally, as the Equal Employment Opportunity Officer, is, but that's not necessarily the charge of the committee. What normally happens is if it's an issue that they feel like I can appropriately contribute to, again, Director O'Hannon and our CAO Hayes will reach out to me, and I was not aware of this particular formal complaint, but in full disclosure, I actually haven't had the opportunity to interact with CAO Hayes for the last 3 days or so, which in our world is a really long time because I work very closely with Alicia. And so I just think it was really, she says it came in last night, probably a timing thing.
Okay. And before I go, I want to do questions for Dr. Clark first. And I'm understanding Supervisor Wilson was not done with his original line of questioning, so we'll go to him, then Bushnell, then Bohn after we finish with Dr. Clark.
Sounds good to me.
Supervisor Bohn, you had a question for Dr. Clark?
And I think, and I don't know he's mentioned this, and it's been under the radar, I want to thank our CAO, Alicia Hayes, and Dr. Clark, because a week ago Saturday, as this was all unfolding, and I have not seen the video, but I had heard enough about it and everything else. I reached out to our CAO. She reached out to Dr. Clark or Natalia, I'm not sure which, and set up a DEI training for Commissioner Bongio on Monday. Was as quick as they could get him inputted into the system and brought him in as a employee, basically, which we do take those into. So I do appreciate that. I'll have more to say on that, but this is my opportunity to thank you. I have not advertised that because I don't know if this is, I've been called every name in the book this week. I should resign also. I guess we're born at the hip with our appointments and things like that, and I appreciate everybody who's written, and especially those that want me to resign.
I don't know if that was a question. I think it was a thank you.
It wasn't, and he thanked me, so I'm going to say my pleasure, Supervisor Bohn, and thank you for the thanks.
And you may want to just, when you sit, just sit in the front row. We might have you back.
Fair
for
enough.
more. All right, so Supervisor Wilson, please continue, and then
Well, I just wanted to emphasize that, this wasn't just offensive language to the people in the room and the people listening. I want to speak to the damage that was also done to the relationships of the county with our tribal counterparts, not just the ones directly involved, but those also listening and hearing, and the wounds that has reopened, and really say that from an institutional perspective, we need to say we're sorry about that, we apologize about that, recognize what has happened, and then recommit ourselves to those relationships and moving forward. So I think it's just really, we have to do that, and with that, I'm ready to make a motion moving forward. Is there anybody online yet before we do this?
well,
or?
I don't know, and I know there's still much more conversation that.
Okay, let's have some more conversation
Okay, I'll
then. But
come
I'm
back
ready
to
to
you,
make
though.
a motion to move forward with what I think we need to do to move forward. But more than anything, it's really about acknowledging the damage that's been done, and what we're going to do about that, and so that's what I have to say.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to Supervisors Bushnell and Bohn.
I'm going to yield to Supervisor Bohn and then come after, if that's okay.
Supervisor Bohn?
Okay, I've been told, be real careful what I say. I've known the Bongio family. I've known Alan for over 55 years. Went to school with his sister. Aldo convinced me 25 years ago to build the first 3 bocce ball courts in Humboldt County. They were considered neighbors out in Cutton. And I guarantee you, it hurt me more than probably any of you to hear what he said, because my relationship with quite a few tribal leaders is very solid, and I have since talked with them about that at length. And as Supervisor Madrone said, we all have bad days. We all say things we shouldn't say. And this was beyond that, I agree. And he got caught up in the fever, and it was bad. And I've told Alan I was disappointed. Doesn't mean I don't appreciate him, his 55 years of friendship. He was younger than me, so I really can't say he was friends. I probably picked on him more. But that doesn't fall lightly on me. What does, when I weigh all this, is his 10 years on the Planning Commission without any written complaints, a lot of verbal complaints that he was too hard on cannabis, too hard on this, too hard on staff, getting answers that we expect, and from a policy-making body, from a body that does not make policy, being a little tougher than he should on some things. I'm okay with that. What he did 2 weeks ago, I'm not okay with, because we've, and when we say tribes, Native Americans, I'm including tribes, rancherias, and everything as one. True Native Americans to our area, and a bigger point. The one person I was hoping to talk to was Ted Hernandez. I barbecued for his son's wedding on Saturday. It was not the proper place or time, but I did tell him it would be hard for me, because we've had board members actually call Alan as recently as 4 months ago to applaud him for the work he's done over the years, tell him how good his chairmanship was and how much he admired his work. He shows up, his attendance is second to none on that board. He has been nominated as chair, which makes me think he has the respect of his other board members. Now, did he lose that respect the other night? I would hope so. So when somebody makes that one mistake and exposes what he's done, I have talked to him, and I haven't talked to him a lot on this, it's kind of funny. But he has agreed to go to more DEI training. He's reached out to tribes. I've talked to a couple of tribes that are willing to sit down with him. And we can all learn from our tribes. They've got a great approach on managing the lands. We're seeing that now on fire. We're seeing that culturally. They've got some great ideas. And the idea that we can work together is fine. But the idea of I would agree with censuring him. I would agree for asking him to step down as chair. But if we're going to ask every one of us that ever makes a mistake, and it was mentioned earlier, Kevin McKinney with all the water issues and everything that was heaped on Kevin, and it ended up being our problem because we broke a drainage line that created a wetlands that was never a wetlands. It was a county issue with a building issue we had with a culvert. Did he ever come back and talk about it? But Kevin got his name dragged through the mud for something that was not his fault. Now, the other night, I'm not saying that was fault. Is that the man that I heard speaking that I know? No. Was that a guy that was? I don't know. And it does not take away how I feel about Alan and our friendship. I'm so disappointed he did that the other night. I support him going forward and learning about the cultural aspects of our Native population. And we've all learned a little bit about Native populations in the last 2 years, 4 years, 10 years. I think we've all learned a little bit. And where they stand, and that we have to respect all Native. We can't pick. We have to respect them all. And so I would make the motion to censor him, have him step down as chair. If he decides he wants to resign, that would be up to him. But he served 20 some odd years, 5 re-elections at the Humboldt Community Services District, and repeatedly voted chair of that governing body. So with that being said, because I'm not hearing that he has a history of this. He certainly made history the other day, but I don't know if it's a patterns and practice. It was a bad day. I don't know what happened to him. I know today he wanted to be here today, and he's down in Stanford, and he's down in Stanford with his wife. And so he couldn't be here today. I will still support my friend. I will still be appalled at the reprehensible statements he made and the way they were presented. And if we don't, and much like the Native Americans and ourselves and what we all do, we're not going to get anywhere unless we're forgiving. We need to address what happened years ago. We need to address what's happening now. But I don't know the idea of the way we do it is just, if you offended us, we cancel you. And I just can't bring myself to it, because I've spent 68 years on this planet, a majority of those trying to help our community, build our community, and hopefully sometimes in there being forgiving with people that was extremely hard to be forgiving. Extremely hard to be forgiving. But I could go the other way and satisfy my own self-gratification, or else I could try to work around it and try to find a better result. And do we end up with a better planning commissioner? Let's see. If the board decides to ask me to resign, I won't do it. I'm sorry. I just think he has too much to offer. And the other thing is, 2 nights a week for 10 years, I think he's already offered a lot. So do we, boy, I almost said shit can. Do we take all of that? Do we take all of that and just throw it down the drain and give him no respect for what he's done over the last 10 years and just say, nope? Or do we say, sit down with Dr. Clark, sit down with Bear River, sit down with what tribes will talk to you and make him a better person, which is going to make him a better planning commissioner? Do we cancel that, or do we allow him to stay on and let him know how we feel about it? But I personally, taking all that, I can't fire my friend. I'm sorry. I too much brought into it. Thank you.
Okay, so you had kind of mentioned a motion, but I know there's some other things to be talked about still. I mean, so it's
I'll make a motion that we censor him and we ask him to step down as chair of the Planning Commission and to work with Dr. Clark and our DEI team for further training to make, that's it, just for further training. You know what kind of training I want him to get.
I'm going to second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion, a second. Supervisor Wilson? Oh, sorry, you wanted to add something. Okay, sorry,
Thank you.
Supervisor Bushnell?
So thank you through the chair. When I was elected, I started watching planning commission meetings to gain knowledge. It's a lot to learn and a lot to take in as a brand new supervisor, and I have learned a lot and continue to learn a lot at planning commission meetings. One thing I'd like to clarify through this board today is, with every email, almost every email we've gotten in the past, and since this has happened with Chair Bongio, they reference to our planning department as being responsible for the planning commission. And I think it's unfair, and it is not a correct statement. Our planning department works really hard, and they don't deserve to be tore up over what the planning commission does. Planning Commission is our responsibility. Each one seated there is our responsibility. And I, time and time again, correct it, but I want us all to correct it as a board and take responsibility for that commission. Regardless if it was Rex's commissioner, my commissioner, we are responsible. And so I think that's why we're talking here today about this. But I also want to support our staff and say that commission does not answer to the planning department. They answer to us and to the community. And it's super important to acknowledge that. Director Ford's staff continually gets tore up for their decisions. And that's not the case. And so I really want to state that. I was at this meeting the night that Mr. Bongio, whatever came over him. It wasn't pleasant, it wasn't comfortable, and I support Rex for bringing the motion forward. I support Supervisor Madrone for bringing the item forward. It definitely, the conversation about the Planning Commission has need to happen for some time, and I'm glad that this board is recognizing that and that we're working towards solutions. I also want to acknowledge that we're all human. And we all do make mistakes, not making exception for Mr. Bongio's actions because he needed to stop. But we all have made mistakes, and how we go forward with those and how we fix ourselves is the super important part. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Supervisor Bohn, if that's okay, and then Supervisor Wilson.
And I would, in the last 10, 11, actually last 13 years, a little bit more. I've a lot of friends in the Native community, but I need to reach out and thank Ryan Sonnenberg probably more than any one person, because I would turn to him and Garth. But Ryan, because I gave Ryan a lot of grief, made jokes with him. We traveled together. We did a lot of things together. But he also told me a lot about his grandmother, how and the way he felt about being a Native American, and I think that helped me grow a lot. Part of the problem is, and this is probably farther than Jeremy Clark, is I did talk to Ted about this. I talked to a couple other tribal leaders. It's education also. We need to get it out there so it is less confrontational and it is more learning about how we accept their way of life, their past way of life, and how we move forward with that acceptance all the way through. And that's, anyway, I've learned a lot. A lot of people haven't learned a lot, as we found out, but I think when we expose these kind of things, it gives everybody a minute to pause and think about how they approach this.
Supervisor Wilson.
Well, first of all, I'd like to ask if the motion maker and the seconder would be amenable to having staff send a letter to tribes acknowledging this situation and working with our DEI staff to get that out and, so that we have a direct communication with our tribal organizations within the county to acknowledge and take responsibility for this situation.
Yeah, I don't have a problem. And I don't want to put our planning and building director on the spot, but I do know that they are working on one that the planning commission can also send out. And I know they're working on, and ours can certainly be separate from that and should be separate from that. But if we're going to do that, and I don't know if the planning department is working with Jeremy's, Dr. Clark's, whatever, Dr. J's team. You were a lot taller when I saw you play. But I don't know if they're working. But I think if we're going to do it that way, and I fully support it, I fully support that, I would like the motion, I would like the letters to be somewhat cohesive together so we're all going in the same, swimming in the same direction. And I don't think that's an issue, but I think to do that is we need a point to run that through, and maybe that would be through Dr. Clark. So we hit the same points, because I think at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is basically, short version, we will never be as appalled as you are about what was said, but we want to step up and let you know we were appalled to the level that we can understand, and we are going to do everything in our powers to fix this. Simple version, but I'm just saying, and that's why I'm talking, and I see Connie Beck's talking to him, so.
So I'm hearing you're
Let me
okay with a
respond.
letter.
Yeah.
But yeah, Supervisor Wilson.
If I can, I mean, and I think it's fine that planning staff and administrative staff work on the letter together. It's not important to me. What's important is that we're having a government-to-government direct communication, and that we can't have that just through the planning commission. That really has to come directly from us. So that's all. And I think
Fully agree. I'm just saying, I don't want them receiving two letters with two different messages, because at the end of the day, and I don't think I don't see how the two messages could be different at the end of the day.
So I'd like to add.
I'm probably just beating this to death like
okay, so
other people would.
Sounds like there's an agreement to add that to the motion in the second, I assume.
Yes, I am fine. However, I'd like to uncomplicate it. Who's going to create the letter from the board and get it there?
Directing staff through the CAO. Yeah.
To come back to this board, or does it matter?
Personally, I think it's as long as we're working through our DEI group, I think, and the chair
Yeah.
and the vice chair maybe
Yep.
could
Seconder's fine.
deal with that. That'd be great.
Can I ask a question for just a moment? After you, Supervisor Bohn, you want to ask, you got your hand up again, kind of, sort of? I just want to have a question for staff. One of the other things, I thought this is not a fun conversation. It's like the last item. This is something we don't really want to be here having to talk about, but we are. In the future, we've talked about the rules. Are we going to be, or maybe this comes at a separate time, is there going to be, when the rework of the Planning Commission, whatever that looks like, that there'll be a process for removal of, because we have our own choices. It's ours, we put people on and we're the ones who can remove them. And I can see in some very egregious issues, there could be an issue. This obviously rose to that level in many respects, but we don't have a process for that. And so I'm just wondering, is there something that for future that there will be a process to follow? I'm kind of like a process person. Your policy, I'm process. So.
Through the chair, yes, there will be a process. In terms of the makeup of the commission, I think what we plan to do is bring you a few options after evaluating what the rest of the state is doing as well. But like I said earlier, we want the code of conduct to also lay out a very clear path so that we don't find ourselves in the position of whose responsibility is it to address this? Through the code of conduct and to Supervisor Wilson's comments earlier, I think first we empower them to take action, but then we have a follow-up to that if they fail to address behaviors such as those that we're discussing, that your board has a clear avenue.
All right, thank you. I just wanted to make sure we memorialize something at some point. Supervisor Wilson, then Bushnell.
Yep. So I just didn't, I just want to finish up here. I want to just push back a little bit with relationship to, having a planning commissioner learn about tribes and tribal context in this community, which is deep, and there's a lot of historical overlays associated with that. But it's not just about learning about another person's culture. It's really having to look deep inside yourself about the biases that we carry and how do we move on that arc towards ridding ourselves of those biases or working really hard on that. That is actually the real work. Learning about culture and doing some appreciation is one aspect, but really it's learning about the historical nature that gets us to this point, and all of the messaging and that we have received as humans over our lifetimes and over our parents' lifetimes, and before that, and where those biases that we have enveloped and that we're working on trying to rid ourselves of, which helps us rid this the community. We need to really work on that. What came out a couple weeks ago was just a lot of bias coming out into the open that the commissioner has been carrying. It's not like it just showed up one day and there it was, and it's going to take work to remove it. And I'm not saying that, and I'm saying that we all carry all kinds of bias. It's just that we need to work on those things and challenge ourselves and appreciate the challenge to do it and to do that hard work. And that's what I'm going to want to see from myself, from the commissioner in question here today, from all of us, is the hard work of doing that. And it's not just bias about culture, it's not just bias about race, it's bias about class, it's bias about gender, it's bias that we carry a lot of those biases. And I think that this just was an explosion of one of those subsects. I mean, because even in the context of the language of that meeting, there was the bias around who you know and the long-term relationships that you have. And then we carry those biases over the bias of who, we carry those biases, and sometimes it impacts decision-making about people we don't know. And so I want to include that in the understanding that we have that historical nature about who owns land, who owns the resources, who owns the control, who's the power, that has the levers, and who doesn't. And that is part of that conversation. And I'm hoping that that it just doesn't end with just this kind of small slice of what we've experienced here. So that was all. Thanks.
I had Supervisor Bushnell, then Bohn. She was first, unless she cedes to you.
Thank you. I had a question for council, I believe. So earlier we were talking about the process to remove somebody from chair, and Director Ford may know this also. I was under the understanding that any commissioner could bring an item forward as an agenda item and could request that. I think that it might already be there. It could be up for discussion now that a commissioner or commissioners could have done that. And sometimes I don't think they know all the time what paths to take. They seem to struggle, as we all do, on, not feeling comfortable, but I don't know where to go with this. So I'm wondering if you know that.
Whether or not a planning commissioner can bring a motion to remove other planning commissioners?
No,
As chair.
from chair. So the question earlier was the process if Mr. Bongio was to be removed by chair, and we were having the discussion that, maybe another planning commission body could do that. And I'm just wondering if that was that possible from the whole time? And I think Director Ford probably has the answer, if you don't.
I would have to look into that. I will defer to Director Ford
Okay.
with regard to that
Thank
question.
you. And I have one more comment after that.
Obviously, that's not something that can just be done.
Right.
That would have to be something that they would get something scheduled on the agenda. It'd be an agendized item. It'd be something that was discussed, and then it would require a motion of the commission.
So I'm going to give you an example, and thank you for that. If a commissioner called you and said, I am very uncomfortable with the activities that are going on by the chair, and I would like to have a discussion, could we put that on the agenda? What would be your answer?
I would say that they would need to bring that up at the meeting and have a motion and a second to have that agendized.
There you go. There's your process. So that's what I was looking for. Additionally, when we have, so you say in October the code of conduct is going to come back. Alicia? Correct. Yeah,
Director
and
Ford,
then-
there's another question, Director Ford. You might.
Go ahead. Then.
But Supervisor Bohn is still in the
Yeah,
line.
that's fine.
I think it's a question of.
So could we put it on the agenda of the Planning Commission?
I've never confronted that before.
Okay, you don't have to come to the answer today. I was just.
I think it could be as a recommendation from the board that the planning commission consider this.
Okay.
That could be agendized. Yes.
Okay. Would that be what we would be recommending as part of the motion?
Go ahead.
No. No, the motion's out there, and I'm hopefully that he's going to be respectful enough of the motion to resign at the next meeting. That's part of the process, too. He could resign as chair on Thursday night, and they can reappoint a new chair. I mean, we could send everything we want, but he's a pretty bright guy. I think he's going to figure out that's what he should do. And I think this way we save his. And I got lost on who owns land, and I didn't know if that was earlier with the thing. But when I said earlier that Dr. Clark was going to help with DEI, and I have reached out to tribal leaders asking them, and they agreed to meet with Alan so he can learn about their way of life from them. Not a book, not anything else. So I was hopefully some of that cultural, because as I said, a lot of us don't understand. Because you're right, we haven't been involved with it. Maybe you are. My biggest exposure, knowing quite a few, but spending as much time as I did with Ryan and him explaining a lot to me. So I don't know what this lunch is for, but anyway, I'm just saying as we move forward. I mean, a pound of flesh. I think he deserves to give up 3 pounds of flesh. I'm not sure. I thought the motion was very directive and full, so.
I just wanted to say, we've talked about learning a way of life. I think it's more than, I'm fine with your motion, but I think it's more than that. It's like internalizing and truly understanding a way of life, not just reading about it so you can bring up, I used to read about things and make answers. It's like it's really, truly understanding. And I think many of us, including myself, have a lot of work to do there to really recognize those things. I think Supervisor Wilson, brought up some really good points, and that's why we have Dr. Clark with us. So we're putting a little bit of pressure on you. That's all I'm saying. No, but I think it's an exciting time, and I will say the DEI project that you brought before us is actually, I've had people from other states have me send it to them because we are ahead of the curve in many ways, and so thank you for that. Okay, we have a motion and a second. We haven't had a public comment yet. Supervisor Madrone?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to see if I could clarify the motion as it has been amended at this point. And I know she has it. I just wanted to speak what I heard and what I thought it was, and then we can confer. One item was to, which was added as an amendment, was to write a letter to the tribes, and the CAO would work with the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Group to draft that. The second item was by Supervisor Bohn, was to actually remove him as chair. That was the way it was worded. I don't know that we have that authority. I think we can recommend that the Planning Commission consider removal, but under our current rules, I'm not sure that we have the authority to remove him as chair. But anyway,
Could
so
we
I'll just-
request him to resign?
It's a recommendation, a request. I just don't think, as it's currently stated, that we can actually do that. But again, let me just finish, please. For him to do DEI training, and that's scheduled as was stated, and then to censure him for those actions. That's what I heard, and I would fully support all of those with that minor correction to what I think we can do in terms of making a recommendation for removal as chair. So, did I get that? What's that?
And the
No, I
letter.
said that. I said it first thing.
Okay,
So is that kind of what you have, Nikki?
Sorry, Supervisor Madrone, yes, I just did change the wording, though. Remove, or, sorry, recommend, remove.
Well, it's not amended yet. Right now.
No, but is this what you're asking?
We're considering amending that. I'm asking the motion maker and the seconder if they would amend that to what I think we can do based on our authority. I appreciate what you said.
Yes, please, Supervisor Bohn, to clarify whatever, I think.
I think it can ride just the way it is, and I will tell you that if he does not give up the chairmanship, I will ask him to resign.
I would.
I think
I'm
that'll
good
take
with
care,
that. I'm
that'll
good with
take
that.
care of all your problems. I have, be it as I may, as disappointed as I am, I'm going to recognize his years of service, 29 years of service to the public domain without any problems till that one day.
I understand.
Maybe there was a built-up bias. Hopefully, we can train him of that. But I also have enough faith in my friend that he's going to trust me on this as much as I'm going to trust him. And I will ask for his resignation, but I am pretty much sure he enjoys serving the community. I said it 9 years ago. The reason I appointed him is he's on his 64th house, so he's not a big developer for a 60-year-old man. But he knows how to get projects through and what it takes. So I think having somebody that pounds nails up there is important. And so I appreciate his position. So I will throw that out there to alleviate any of your concerns.
I think that's a very strong statement on your part, Supervisor Bohn, and I thank you for that. And with that, I drop my request for any amendment, and it can stand as it is. There's one other thing I'd like to do that's not included, but let's just see where we go with this motion.
Should we could go to public comment, which we haven't done
That would
yet.
be good.
All right. So if you're listening or if you're watching on the video and you wish to call in, please do and press *9 to raise your hand. Turn the volume off on your video feed, because if you don't, you're going to get a time delay and you may miss your opportunity to speak. It unfortunately happens frequently. We have several hands, well, one hand up, but several numbers. So again, if you're interested in speaking, press *9. And a reminder, it's a strict 3-minute limit. So we will go to the only hand up at the moment is 9334. So if you're 9334, press *6 to unmute. Welcome.
Hello, hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, hi, Dennis Mail here. So it looks like you've got a pretty good handle on the aspect of the angry outburst. The DEI is very important. We work on it. I've worked on many committees where we had to, or not had to, but we're fortunate enough to enter into this process. Because of the frustration of that night, I saw it. The planning staff was frustrated. Other planning commissioners were frustrated, and I'm sure the tribal representative who was stuck on the Zoom cube and couldn't get through was frustrated. So that frustration was real, but it's no justification for the action and language of Mr. Bongio, and I strongly believe that he has clearly come to terms with that. But I look at this as a huge learning opportunity for all of us. Mr. Bongio and the planning staff will learn more about DEI, but us as a county and our processes, our protocols, and our decision-making, we need to really focus in on the who, why, where, and when of negotiations in the public process. Why do I say that? Well, I read an interesting article online here the other day, a local person who talked about tribal negotiations, reminding him of the negotiations he did internationally with Japanese negotiators, and how that process was so much different than the process that we're used to. Typical U.S. style, if you're negotiating in good faith, you do it by sending a negotiating team with the authority to make binding commitments and not have some back entity which never negotiates directly, but just makes the decisions and pronouncements. So this person asked a question that came up at the Planning Commission meeting. So were the tribal representatives lying or just somewhat lacking in candor as to their role and authority in the negotiating process? He says, I offer no opinion on this, but I will say that these stakeholders have no actual power or legal authority to force any agreement terms, then I would likely refuse to continue any proactive and possible futile further negotiations. I think that's a big, big issue here that although wasn't at the forefront, this action.
Dennis, I'm sorry. So 3 minutes. But you can certainly send in an email with whatever you were not able to fit in. I'm sorry, 3 minutes goes really fast. There are no other hands up that I see. So we'll go to those in person with us here. Is there anyone here who wanted to make public comment on this item? Please, Jim, 3 minutes, sorry.
I can do it in less than 3 minutes.
Right.
I want to speak on behalf of the Human Rights Commission, which I think has a role here, or could have a role. And I would hope that the Committee on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion would keep us in the loop on your training program and any steps that might be relevant that we might be able to contribute to. Today, you have focused greatly on one issue, or one person, one instance. Your vote is going to be whatever it is, but I hope that you will have learned from this, as I've been listening all day, that this is a broad problem. And right now, you're focused on one situation, but your solutions have got to be able to handle a variety of situations. Had this been the Human Rights Commission, how would you have handled it? Would you have handled it differently? Should you have handled it differently? I don't know the answer to that, but I think you need to find that answer. And you have other boards and commissions which may fall into a similar situation someday, somewhere down the road. Please make whatever decisions you make broad enough and with enough foresight to make a real difference in the long term. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Thanks for staying with us all day. And there's no one else coming up, so we'll go back to the board. Supervisor Bohn.
Jim, I appreciate that. And one situation caused what happened today, but I think the blanket has been thrown out to cover a lot of situations, much like Megan's Law, Laura's Law, Polyclot. Those were individuals that have spread out. And I think what we've done here today is opened a lot of people's eyes, given an opportunity for someone to change and be better, ourselves included, a lot of inner thinking, and I I appreciate the work. We haven't voted yet, so I'm not going to be too excited, but I appreciate the candor and the way we were able to discuss this without me throwing my hands in the air once, I don't think.
And I did, thank you, Supervisor Bohn. I wanted to acknowledge someone did have their hand up, but the reason why we didn't call on you now is because that time had passed. So I do apologize. It just unfortunately happens that way sometimes. All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any further conversation? Supervisor, whoa, that's a tie. Okay, so we're going to go Wilson versus and then Simone. What's your name? I've changed your name. Madrone.
I just wanted to recognize what Jim is saying, and I think it is true. It's obviously an issue that's beyond one human and one group and one point in time, and I believe that this institution is addressing that through our DEI work that started, a few years ago and has been really working very, very hard on that. And we're not alone as an institution doing that work. City of Arcata, other jurisdictions, institutions, HAF, everybody, not everybody, but I hope everybody is working on this. And again, it's an arc to imperfection. Ultimately, we're humans and we're trying to get to that better place, and I appreciate the work that you're doing on that too. So thanks.
And Supervisor Madrone, I will say I'm sorry for garbling up your name. I think I need a break.
Yeah. No, I'm fine. I also appreciate Jim being here today with all his work with the Human Rights Commission and all of the members of that commission. I was actually watching you guys on Channel 10 I think it was yesterday. You were being interviewed, a bunch of the members, Marianne Lyons, yourself, and others that have just dedicated tremendous service to this community, so thank you for that. These situations, especially when, we do something, I gave the example of myself earlier in the meeting, I really see it as a real opportunity, because we are going to make mistakes like that. I certainly did. And I think, I felt honored to actually have a chance to try and correct my behavior. I'll just put it that way. And I think this is a teachable moment here in what's happening. And I wanted to reinforce what the chair said earlier about the process that the CAO will be bringing back to us in regards to considerations of the rules for the Planning Commission and all our committees and commissions, as Jim was pointing out. Let's say I appoint somebody, but they go off the rails, we'll just call it, to put it simply. And I decide not to remove somebody, well, does the rest of the board have an opportunity to step in that kind of a case? Right now, no, that's not the way it works. We have that authority. I would certainly love to see those kinds of options to consider, because there may be biases that prevent us from taking care of a situation and doing what others may think is the right thing to do. Of course, that's a very personal thing, but I just wanted to reinforce that I think it's good to take a close look at our rules and how we do these appointments, and have a kind of a fallback process for what if, and have it apply across the board. So I just wanted to share that input, and I think that's what I heard the CEO said, that they would be coming back with options for us to consider in terms of moving forward. So we've had a great discussion. I appreciate that, and I want to thank Supervisor Bohn in particular for a lot of what you said here tonight, and for your willingness to really see how serious this was. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Supervisor Madrone. Anyone else have a comment before we vote? Supervisor Wilson? No? Okay. I think we're ready, Nikki.
Okay. Supervisor Bohn? Yes. Supervisor Bushnell?
Yes.
Supervisor Madrone?
Yes.
Supervisor Wilson?
Yes.
And Supervisor Bass?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, thank you everyone for being here for this. And then I did want to ask, I know we have a late time set, and we also have a closed session. Okay. How long is this one? Because I'm going to take a short break, I think, beforehand. Just letting you know. A true 5. That's for all of you. No, I'm starting at 5. That's all I need. So we'll try to be back at 12:20. 2:30 time set. We're close. All right, so we're going to move on to the next item, which is the presentation of the fiscal year 2019-20 audit reports. And we have a team here. Auditor Controller, Interim Auditor Controller Dillingham, who's almost, you're, never mind, you're Cheryl. I'll turn this over to the, who do I go, CAO first? You introduce them?
Sure, yes. Today we have with us Auditor Controller Cheryl Dillingham and Assistant County Administrative Officer / Chief Financial Officer / Interim Assistant Auditor Controller Tabitha, who has been serving obviously in many roles. And on Zoom we have Rich Gonzalez with us from Clifton Larson Allen. And this dynamic trio will be presenting the fiscal year 1920 audit. And before we kick that off, I just want to say fabulous job on getting this work done and carving out a path to get us caught up on all of our audits. This is monumental work and incredibly important to our agency to have these documents solidified, and is really going to help us to move forward in a good financial way. So thank you.
So I was just going to do a brief introduction of what we're going to go over today, and then I'll turn it over to Rich Gonzalez, who is our principal auditor and also a CPA with Clifton Larson Allen. So there's three things we're asking the board for this afternoon. One is just to receive and file the audit reports that were prepared by Clifton Larson Allen for the year ended June 30th, 2020. Also receive and file the corrective action plan that was put together to respond to the findings identified in the single audit associated with those financial statements and that audit for the year ending June 30th, 2020, and then approve the audit engagements for the next two fiscal years, which are ending June 30th, 2021 and June 30th, 2022. And what this really means, this is a pretty compressed time frame, but it's the way to get us back on track. Our goal is to have those additional two audits done by June 30th of 2023, which does mean that you will have 3 years worth of audits done in a single year. There were some financial ramifications of that, simply just sort of consolidating that all of those payments into this current fiscal year that's outlined in the fiscal impact here. But with that, I think we should probably turn it over to Rich Gonzalez, and he's going to present the financial statements and the findings of the audit and sort of introduce you to the topic. And I know he's with us via Zoom, or I hope he is.
Is he going to pop up on the screen too?
I assume so.
Rich, we can't hear you. But you're not muted either. Sometimes it helps if you log out and log back in, or try calling in.
How about now?
Yep. Welcome.
Okay, perfect. All right. All right, good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board. Thanks for having me here today. I'm here to present the financial statements for the County of Humboldt for 6/30/2020. Am I able to share my screen with everyone?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
We say
let's
yes.
stop here. Okay, everybody see my presentation?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so in this presentation, I'm going to briefly discuss the purpose of our audit, discuss our audit approach. I'm going to summarize the audit results by engagement, because we did have 3 deliverables. I'm going to go over key points of the required audit communication to governance, which is you, the board. And then finally, we're going to discuss some recent GASB pronouncements that will impact you for 21 and 22. Okay, so the purpose of our audit is to express opinions providing reasonable but not absolute assurance whether your financial statements are free from internal misstatement or they're due to fraud or error. And I want to emphasize reasonable. So we're not concerned if there's a petty cash discrepancy. We'll communicate that to management, but that's not really our purpose. as an example. Okay, as far as our audit approach, so we have 4 main phases. The first phase is planning. This is where we develop a timeline with the county. We do a preliminary risk assessment and account analysis of all the county's significant accounts. At this time, we also provide a PBC listing to the county, listing all the items needed for the audit. The second phase is our system evaluation. This is where we understand the county's key controls, and sometimes we'll test those controls to make sure they're operating effectively. At this stage, we'll design audit programs based on our risk. The third phase, and this is kind of where things fell apart this year, is we finalize a review of the trial balance. The trial balance pretty much drives all our testing at year end. Without the trial balance, we cannot do a lot of testing. And then once we do receive the trial balance and we review it, then we perform our field work. And at that time, we execute our audit plan. And then the final phase is reporting. This is our review of the deliverables, including your financial statements, single audit report, and the management letter. And at this stage, we communicate any findings or recommendations. Okay, so here's a summary of audit results by engagement. So for the audit of the financial statements, we did have various opinions, and I'll kind of go over this briefly. And then we had 8 findings. So we had 1 significant deficiency, and we had 7 material weaknesses. And then for our audit of the passenger facility charges report, we had to disclaim an opinion. And this is because we could not get a current schedule. So we just said we cannot give an opinion on your schedule because one does not exist. And then because of that, we did issue a material weakness and a material noncompliance. All right, so back to our opinion. Now, the county wants a modified opinion, but this year we had 2 or 3 issues that impacted the opinion. So as a roll forward from last year, we cannot give an opinion on the Fortuna Fire, which is a discretely presented component unit. And the main reason is because the financial statements were not available. And last we checked, the capital assets had not been audited. So we felt we just needed to keep them off your statements and just not give an opinion. As far as the governmental activities, the qualification, this is because we cannot review your compensated absences. Every year, the county's auditor controller's office will run the comp absences report at June 30th, and those are the balances that we audit that reflect the accumulated leave for all the county employees. Because that report was not generated, and for some reason the county cannot go back and run it, we had to qualify our opinion on that. And then finally, the aggregate remaining fund information, we have a qualification. This had to do with some outstanding checks with the schools, which are part of the investment trust fund. Rather than hold up the report, we decided to just qualify the opinion and issue the audit opinion. For the single audit, you'll be happy to know that we did issue an unmodified opinion on compliance of our major programs. And we also issued an unmodified opinion on controls of our major programs. And we had no findings at all. Down below, you'll see a listing of major programs that we tested. That includes the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program Cluster, your Home Loan Program, TANF, which is Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, Medi-Cal, and then disaster grants from FEMA. Okay, now for the findings. So we issued 8 findings for the financial statements, and I'll go over each one of them briefly. So the first one was a roll forward from last year, but we had to add some more items to it. The condition is that reconciliations are not being performed for several accounts. Capital assets look really good this year, and that's one of the most complicated accounts to reconcile, but for some reason, the other accounts were not addressed. That includes PARS, which is reported as cash on your statements. That was not even reported in your accounting system, and that had a $6.1 million balance at June 30th. So our recommendation is develop a formal year-end closing schedule, and then of course, perform timely reconciliations and update the GL accounts throughout the year. That way you won't have these discrepancies when you close. Okay, the second finding is also a roll forward from last year. This is a material weakness, and this has to do with trust fund activity. The county has been working on this the last 5 years or so, but unfortunately there's still 140 trust funds with approximately $33 million of cash that's sitting there. Again, we recommend the county go through and close out any funds that are not necessary. It just creates a lot of complexity, which results in, it could result in errors with all the adjustments having to be made to move the funds from a trust fund to an operating fund.
Rich, sorry, Supervisor Bohn has a question for you. Are you okay if we interrupt you for questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Hi, Rich, Rex Bohn. Hey, on the trust funds, it just went off the screen. On the trust funds, we've been talking about trimming them down for 10 years, more than 10 years I know of. And I know I used to have 6 checking accounts. I'm down to a manageable 2. And what I did is I just took the money out of them, closed them. I imagine governments are a little tougher. But 140, if we go into one of those trust funds that has no money in it or has money in it but no activity for 18 months or whatever the time frame is, how hard is that to shut one of those down? What would it take to shut one of those down? Because this has been and it's got to be time consuming because I guess we have to look at them at least once or twice a year. So what would the process be to shut these down? We're spending more time talking about them than anything.
No, we're just saying,
Yeah,
I didn't know she had it.
And I think it's up to the ACO. It depends on the policy, but it's, if there's no activity, I can't see there being an issue with just closing it. But I would definitely check with the ACO on the policy for closing unnecessary funds.
Yes.
I would love to have the support of the Board of Supervisors to proceed in that manner.
You got 20%.
Put it on the agenda, right? Well, okay. Go ahead and we'll figure that.
Thank you.
Okay, so another condition of this is we did find a couple of payments made out of a trust fund, $2 million worth. No issues. There's proper support, but our concern is that there were no appropriations, and something could happen if these trust funds are not tightened up. So we don't think any fund should leave the county without an appropriation. As far as our recommendation, like we discussed, the county should analyze each trust fund to determine if necessary, and of course, consider closing several of these funds in operating that maintain budgets. And that'll solve your appropriations issue. A good news for the county, and we'll discuss this a little later in the presentation, there's a new standard, GASB 84, which requires the county to analyze every single fiduciary fund and every trust fund. So this might be a good point to address these funds again and to close a lot of the ones that are not necessary. Okay, so our third finding, this is a roll forward from last year. This is regarding that Fortuna Fire Protection District. So this district's a discretely presented component unit, and it's because the county appoints the board and can remove the board at will. So the recommendation here is that their audits get caught up and that they clear the qualification on the capital assets. That way we can include them in your financials next year without having to disclaim an opinion. Okay, this fourth one's a big one. This is a new one, receivables and revenue. So we had several significant adjustments with regard to receivables and revenue. Some of the highlights below, we found $2.2 million of receivable balances from last year that should have been cleared and that were not. They just rolled forward and were added on to the new receivables. We also found understatement of approximately $8 million. So basically these are amounts that were, either receipts that were received in the subsequent year or estimates that should have been accrued and that were not. And then finally, we had various discrepancies between the ACO and departments. I think part of this was the county implemented a module and there wasn't a lot of communication on what was happening in the module. In our discussions with departments, they were used to providing their information to the ACO, the Auditor Controller's Office, but it doesn't look like they really understood what was rolling forward from last year. So they created a lot of duplication and a lot of misstatements. So as far as a recommendation, the county should do a cutoff test, just look at subsequent receipts to identify anything that should be accrued back to the proper fiscal year. Also review posted balances by both the ACO and the departments, including analyzing roll forward balances. So the ACO is responsible for closing and for ensuring those balances are accurate. But at the same time, the departments are also responsible for providing accurate information. And the departments can know more about the receivables than the auditor controllers. So this should be a joint effort between the departments. Okay, next finding. This was a minor one, but we reported it because it was material. So we had a subsequent disbursement that was not accrued in the proper period. And there's only one exception, and we looked at several of these transactions. So we don't see much of a concern here. But our recommendation is just to make sure there aren't issues going forward is for the county to review subsequent disbursements for cutoff. So basically just have a process in place that any significant payment made after June 30th is analyzed for proper reporting. Okay, the next finding, 220006, this was a major one this year, and this resulted in very significant adjustments. So this has to do with the interfund balances. So this includes interfund loans, interfund advances, also interfund transfers, and interest apportionments. So down below, we have some highlights of some of the adjustments we had to make. The first item was reconciliations not performed. This is a common theme this year. So we had a net difference of $2.3 million that we had to resolve to get the transfers to balance. This next one was huge. So the Auditor Controller's Office recorded an interfund advance for the debt payments that are due from different departments. And there was two issues with that. The first issue is they should not be reporting a loan for those amounts. It's not really a loan. It's more of a pay-as-you-go, where the county will budget for those transfers as payments are due. The second issue is one of the adjustments was recorded backwards, and because the reconciliation wasn't done, it wasn't caught. So that resulted in an $18 million adjustment to the financial statements. So that means fund balance was off by $18.6 million. Finally, there's been issues with interest apportionments. The issue that we encountered was they were not reported properly in the system. They were reported as transfers, which means they were commingled with other transfers. Even though technically those funds are being transferred out of the interest apportionment fund, they're not really transfers, it's interest. So by not having any interest recorded in your financials or in your accounting system, departments are not able to identify how much interest they received during the year. So our recommendations for that one is, again, reconcile the interfunds prior to closing. Your transfers in should equal your transfers out. Advances to funds should equal your advances from other funds. Books should not be closed until that happens. And then finally, additional training on interfund reporting. Just because funds are being moved from one fund to another, that doesn't make it a transfer. For example, if you have a fiduciary fund transferring funds to a county department, that's revenue. That's not a transfer because that fiduciary fund is outside the county. So, okay, we've got two more findings to go over. So this one here was another big one, cash reconciliations not being performed. So in the past, there's always been challenges with the cash recs, and we always had to kind of piece it together, perform alternate procedures. But one thing that was always happening was the ACO was always analyzing all the transactions and comparing the GL to the statements. This year, none of that was done. Like there were no procedures performed at all. So we had to hold up our report until those reconciliations were caught up. We did find about $380,000 in deposits in the bank statement that were not recorded in the GL. Fortunately, there was nothing else that stood out during the review. So recommendation is perform those reconciliations timely, at least once a month. And we just want to note that the auditor's office has recently established a process for performing reconciliations and is catching up, which is good to hear. And then finally, develop formal procedures, which include the review of outstanding check listings for all accounts. This is another common theme, is just having formal procedures in writing. That way, when there's a transition, there's instructions that the next team can follow. Okay, the final one, I think you're all familiar with this one. So this had to do with the timing of the information. So I want to say the average time for counties closing the trial balance is about 3 months after year end. And that way they're able to issue their financial statements by December 31st. So with Humboldt, the trial balance was not provided to us until August of 2021, which was 19 months after year end. And then we found out that that trial balance was not complete, and we received a newer trial balance in December with about $30 million of adjustments just to the asset accounts. So we basically had to redo all of our analysis and planning. Recommendation is develop formal month-end and year-end closing schedules, and then include a list of tasks, due dates for each task, and responsible employee and supervisor review for each task. And doing our interviews during the audit, it didn't seem like a lot of the tasks were assigned to anybody. And that's probably the reason why not a lot of the stuff didn't get done. Okay, now moving on to the passenger facility charges. You know, this one here, we just had that one finding. The issue here was the quarterly reports were not prepared and submitted timely. So our recommendation is to perform those reconciliations timely of revenue and expenditures to the GL and submit those reports every quarter by the due date. Okay, next section, just want to go over the required audit communication. These are key matters that we're required to communicate to you as the board. So accounting policies, those are all described in note 1. There were no significant changes during the year. Accounting estimates, the county has about 4 significant estimates. There's the claims liability, which are based on third-party actuarial reports. There's a net pension liability and the OPEB liability. Those are also based on actuarial reports. And then the new one this year is the pollution remediation liability. And this is based on estimated costs and insurance recoveries provided by the county's legal counsel and other third parties. Corrected misstatements, we had several significant adjustments that are summarized in our letter to you. So that should be attached to the letter. If you don't have a copy, let me know and I will resend it. Uncorrected misstatements, again, attached to the letter. Nothing really of significance here, except for the fair market value adjustment for investments, but most counties do not report that because it's not really material and it's a lot of work. Disagreements of management, we did not have any. We did not have any consultations with other accounts. All right, just 2 more pages. Fraud and legal acts, we did not identify any fraud or legal acts. As far as difficulties encountered during the audit, so I just summarized 4 key items. One was just the reconciliations not being available, especially for cash. So that created significant delays in our audit. Another item which we discussed earlier, the updated trial balance is not provided until December of 2021. So of course that delayed the start of our audit. There were several significant audit adjustments, especially with receivables and interfund. And then one thing that kind of delayed the audit was there was a staff member who was assigned to our audit and she was really good, very responsive, but then she left the county before the audit was complete. And there was really no one available to take over her position until a few weeks later, which left a communication void between us and the county. There's a couple more items here. So other information and documents containing audited financial statements. So we give in relation to opinion for the CFA and the supplementary information, basically saying that those schedules tie back to your financial statements. We don't give an opinion on your introductory section, but for your county, it's really just a listing of key members of the county. And then finally, management representations. Management did provide us a signed copy of the rep letter upon completion of our engagement. And that rep letter did include any past adjustments. Okay, and the final part of this presentation is you've got a couple of pronouncements coming up, and these are big ones. The first one we kind of mentioned earlier, GASB Statement 84, fiduciary activities. So this will require the county to analyze every single fiduciary fund to make sure it's properly reported under the new guidance. And then the really big one, this is for 2021, GASB Statement 87, leases. So this is changing the way leases are reported in your financial statements. Just a quick recap. In the past, your leases were just summarized as a footnote. With the standard, it's going to actually make it to your balance sheet. So you're going to have to report a right to use asset and a lease obligation. So it's going to create a lot of work for the county for 21. So that's all I have. Any questions?
Let me see, any questions for Rich at this moment? I do not see any. I know Supervisor Madrone is not in with us in the room. He is listening from his office at the moment. I'm going to ask Supervisor Madrone, is there anything you wanted to ask? Apparently not. Okay, so Supervisor Wilson? No?
I'm just amazed at the advancements we've made, and I'm just really appreciative of that. I mean, there's obviously stuff we have to work on. But it's inherent in what's been happening. But I just want to be thankful for how far we've gotten and the trajectory that we're on. That's just my main point. Thank you.
Well put. Anyone else? Supervisor Bushnell and then Bohn?
I also want to thank Auditor Controller Dillingham and her staff. I know that you have taken on a lot and accomplished a lot, and I'm very appreciative of what you're getting done and having to do the backlog.
Supervisor Bohn?
I'm going back to and I don't know if this is maybe for the 18 million, we went backwards and lost 8, and I need to wrap that around. Did we gain or did we lose $18 million? Or did you find, or how, I mean, that's hard to lose.
It wasn't lost and it wasn't gained. It was just basically miscategorized and entered into the books incorrectly. So we never had it and we never lost it. We just recorded it for a couple of years. It was purely just an entry that shouldn't have been done, but it was done backwards, so it doubled it.
Well, I just appreciate an audit report that's complete without blame, so thank you.
I'll make a motion that we adopt staff's recommendations. And does it need to be more specific, Scott?
Bless you.
I don't have it up in front of me, so.
Oh, we've got it up over here.
I believe that we should probably read it into the record.
He's got it in front of him, so.
I'll take a shot here, and it's a very lightly printed piece of paper, so you have to excuse me. I'll make the motion that we receive and file the audit reports prepared by Clifton Larson Allen regarding financial statements of the County of Humboldt for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2020, and 2, receive and file the corrective action plan on behalf of the county for Humboldt as a response to findings identified in the single audit report for fiscal year that ended in June 30th, 2020, and then also approve the audit engagements for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2021 and June 30th, 2022, and authorize the county administrative office to sign the proposal, execute the engagement contracts, and all subsequent amendments regarding the provision of external audit services after review and approval by county council and risk management. And I recommend a yes vote.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. We will go to public comment. I do not see any hands up in the queue online. All right, go to those in the public here, and I don't believe there's any here to comment either. So back to the board. Any further conversation or just ready to vote? Ready to vote.
Okay, Supervisor Wilson?
Yes.
Supervisor Bass?
Yes.
Supervisor Bushnell?
Yes.
Supervisor Bohn? Yes. And is Supervisor Madrone, you said, listening in?
He can.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Supervisor Madrone. Motion passes 5-0.
Can I, once again, send the message back to you, to your staff? Great job.
Yes, thank you very much.
I'd just also like to thank Tabitha for all her assistance and all of the county departments and the auditor staff for all the work they've done to get us where we are today.
Well said,
Thank
Cheryl.
you. Glad to have you on board. And Tabitha. Everybody. So here we are going back into closed session. I believe. Is that what we have next?
Correct,
Okay.
yeah. Just one item to wrap up. It shouldn't take us very...
Don't ask.
Yeah.
Don't guess.
Shouldn't take us too long.
Let me know when you're ready, Nick. Okay. Interim County Council Miles, do we have any report out of closed session?
Thank you, Chair Bass. With regard to item L3, the board voted unanimously to not authorize outside counsel retained by the county to file a petition for review with the California Supreme Court in the case of Richard M. Lenner versus Superior Court for the County of Humboldt, case number A164631. There was no reportable action taken with regard to items L4 through L6.
All right, thank you. And with that, we are adjourned.